Chapter 284. Chu Liuyue's eyes curved into crescents as she heaved a sigh of relief. However, she wasn't happy at all. Instead, she was confused. Mu Qinghe seemed to care a lot about the Daijing Yuan Meridian. Did he come to country Yaochen specifically to find a genius with the Daijing Yuan Meridian? However, in the Tianling dynasty, such people weren't common, but they weren't rare either. Why did he come all the way here to find them? Everyone looked at Chu Liyue in shock. It took them a while to come back to their senses. What did this mean? Chu Liyue really had the Daijing Yuan Meridian. Didn't that mean that she could follow Mu Qinghe to the Tianling dynasty? Mu Qinghe put away the stone. Chu Liyue asked tentatively. Vice Admiral Mu, since it's proven that I have the Daijing Yuan Meridian, then what you said before, Mu Qinghe was expressionless. You can indeed follow me back since you have the Daijing Yuan Meridian. Chu Liyue held her breath. She could clearly hear the sound of her heart beating fast. Don't be happy too early. Having the Daijing Yuan Meridian is just the beginning. There are other requirements. If you can't meet them, you won't be able to go. Mu Qinghe said calmly. Chu Liyue lowered her eyes. Thank you, Vice Admiral Mu. Lu Yu will do his best. She knew that things weren't that simple. However, this was still an opportunity. It was even more in line with her thoughts. Although she wanted to go back as soon as possible and let those people experience the pain she had experienced, she knew very well that now wasn't the best time. With her current strength, she would just be courting death if she went back and fought them head-on. Mu Qinghe grunted. It was hard to tell whether he was happy or angry. Chu Liyue heaved a sigh of relief, but the others had mixed feelings. Everyone present had come with hope, but the requirements for the Daijing Yuan Meridian were too high, and they could not fulfill them. In the end, it was Chu Liyue who came out on top again. How could they be happy about this? Emperor Zhaowen hesitated for a while, but he still carefully asked, Vice Admiral Mu, do you really only want people with the Daijing Yuan Meridian? Actually, there are some. Although they are not the Daijing Yuan Meridian, they are still very good. Why don't you pick some more? If they're all like him, then there's no need to say anything more. Mu Qinghe's gaze swept past Rong Jin. Rong Jin was even more embarrassed. As the crown prince, he had never experienced such a thing. Even when his father grounded him and took back many of his rights, he had never felt so humiliated. This was equivalent to giving him a few tight slaps in front of everyone. Emperor Zhaowen didn't know how to reply at that moment. Not to mention Rong Jin, even he didn't dare to show any displeasure when someone said that to him. Hearing Mu Qinghe's words, he couldn't continue and could only shut his mouth awkwardly. The entire palace's atmosphere became even stranger and colder. However, Chu Liyue was very calm as he calmly ate his food and ignored the surrounding gazes. Rongjin clenched her teeth and hated Chu Liyue for getting this rare opportunity one moment, and she was also annoyed at her previous rashness the next moment. After being reprimanded by Mu Qinghe, she originally felt very humiliated. However, when she saw that Mu Qinghe treated the others the same way, including Rong Jin, she didn't feel so angry anymore. When she gradually calmed down, she also felt that her previous actions were a little overboard. Who is Mu Qinghe? He's the Tianling dynasty's envoy. He's the high and mighty lieutenant. Even father has to give in to him, so what if I'm reprimanded by him? Besides, I'm still counting on Mu Qinghe to help me heal my body. Thinking of this, she gave the Empress a look. The Empress saw the urgency in Rongjin's eyes and naturally knew what she meant. However, this made her even more frustrated. Does Rongjin think that I don't want to ask Mu Qinghe for help? Why doesn't she know? Look at the situation now. First, it was the crown prince, then it was Rongjin. This pair of siblings was reprimanded in front of so many people, and she lost all her face. If they really made Mu Qinghe unhappy, he could casually kill them with one finger. How could she speak now? Seeing that the Empress didn't move, Rongjin couldn't help but feel anxious and even wanted to get up a few times. Luckily, the palace servant standing behind her had already received the Empress's signal and silently held her back. Rongjin was very unhappy, but she didn't dare to really make a scene in this place, so she could only bear with it. At this point, something suddenly flew in from outside the door. Chu Luiyue took a look and was suddenly stunned. It was a green sparrow. It was only the size of a palm, and its entire body was green. However, its claws and eyes were red. Especially its pair of eyes, they were as bright as rubies and were very beautiful. This green sparrow flapped its wings and flew very quickly, but it didn't make any sound. Hence, when the people in the palace discovered it, it had already rushed to the center of the palace. "Stop it!" Rongjin frowned and hollered. "What are you doing? What kind of place is this? Can't even stop these random things." The guards outside rushed in one after another, but they couldn't say anything after hearing Rongjin scolding. The flying speed of this thing was simply too fast. They couldn't stop it in time. "Your Highness, please calm down. We have important guests here today. This is my fiend." Mu Qinghe, who was sitting at the head of the table, suddenly spoke. Rongjin's remaining words were suddenly stuck in his throat, and his entire body froze. His limbs were cold. Mu Qinghe waved his hands, and the green sparrow flew toward him. Silence reigned in the hall. The green sparrow landed in Mu Qinghe's hands. Mu Qinghe glanced at it and saw that there was a trace of blood under its wings. He knitted his brows slightly, and a cold light flashed across his eyes. "You're injured. Who hurt you?" The green sparrow moved its wings and covered the blood stains. Mu Qinghe knitted his brows even tighter. Hong Yao was a 7th grade fiend. It was very strong and rarely lost. Yesterday, it was a little anxious for some reason, so he let it out. He didn't expect it to be injured. Who else in country Yaoqin has such capabilities? Hong Yao bit the feathers on its wings, feeling wronged. Mu Qinghe said coldly, "Why didn't you say before? What did you promise before coming here? That you wouldn't cause any trouble. Are you obedient now?" Hong Yao didn't expect to be scolded even when it was injured, and it felt even more wronged. Its beautiful, ruby-like eyes didn't blink, but they quickly filled with tears, making it look very pitiful. Mu Qinghe suddenly sighed in his heart. Hong Yao has really been spoiled by that person. It feels wrong just by saying a few words. "Hong Yao," Mu Qinghe's voice became stricter. Hong Yao suddenly turned around. Suddenly, it paused and looked at Chu Luiyue in a daze. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. The next moment, he saw the small red sparrow flying toward him. Digression, Khan was so stuck that he wanted to die. His computer screen suddenly turned white again. The last chapter will be updated before midnight. I'm so unlucky today that I have nothing to say. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 285. News of what happened at the palace banquet quickly spread among the aristocratic families in the imperial capital. Chu Luiyue also became the topic of discussion. First, she took first place twice in the Qing Jiao competition. Then, she was chosen to follow Mu Qinghe to the Tianling dynasty because of her Daijing Yuan meridian. In just a few days, Chu Luiyue became famous. She became the envy of everyone. Ordinary people might not know, but the important figures in the aristocratic families all knew what the Tianling dynasty meant. From now on, Chu Luiyue would have a meteoric rise and a bright future ahead of her. The palace banquet ended in the afternoon, but Chu Luiyue had already received many gifts at night. She didn't need to look to know that those were people who wanted to get close to her, so she rejected all of them. After returning to the academy, she even chose to enter Joyo Tower to cultivate, regardless of the storm outside. At the Chu residence. Chu Xiao returned to the Chu residence with a gloomy face. The servants trembled in fear when they saw his expression and didn't dare to say anything. However, this situation was quickly changed. Since the afternoon, people kept asking to see him. And they were all asking for the same thing. What? Let Chu Ning and his daughter return to the Chu family. Hearing their suggestion, Chu Xiao exploded like gunpowder that had been ignited. That's impossible. Don't even think about it. Chu Ning and his daughter had already broken off all ties with the Chu family. Everyone in the imperial capital knew that they were at odds with each other. If they were to discuss this matter with them now, it would be equivalent to them admitting defeat. By then, the entire Chu family would become the laughingstock of the imperial capital. Chu Xiao felt uncomfortable every time he thought of that. He was determined not to agree. However, the members of the Chu family, who had always obeyed him, were also very determined this time. Great Elder, things are different now. The news that Chu Luiyue was chosen to go to the Tianling dynasty has already spread among the aristocratic families. Even if she had a huge conflict with us in the past, we are still family. The same blood flows in our bodies. Why can't we let it go? That's right. She's no longer the useless trash that she used to be. Needless to say, her achievements in the future will definitely be great. This is also a great opportunity for the Chu family. Grand Elder, it's not as if we don't have your concerns. However, if we continue to fight with them, we'll only be at a disadvantage. After today, how many people in the imperial capital will want to get close to Chu Luiyue? She's still from the family. As long as we take the initiative to ask for peace, she will definitely give us face. Listening to their hopeful words one after another, Chu Xiao was extremely irritated. He abruptly interrupted them and shouted angrily, "Let's go. You! Don't you know what kind of Chu Luiyue? If you ask her for peace now, you're just asking for your own humiliation." Everyone looked at each other in dismay, feeling a little troubled. In fact, how could they not know this point? But wasn't there no other way? Could it be that he could only watch helplessly as such a great opportunity was missed? Compared to the Tianling dynasty, what was this little bit of face? As long as they could repair their relationship with Chu Luiyue, they could have whatever they wanted in the future. Great Elder, we all know that you don't like Chu Luiyue. However, shouldn't you think about the entire Chu family now? Third Elder suddenly spoke, his tone slightly cold. Chu Xiao's expression turned stern. What do you mean? The third Elder smiled. Nothing. We all know why Chu Luiyue left the Chu family. To be honest, it's because of you. It's not a big deal if you're safe. However, Chu Luiyue is different now. We're in a favorable position. Wouldn't it be a pity if we give up just like that? The others nodded. Chu Ning and his daughter are not unreasonable people. As long as we sincerely apologize, I believe we can salvage the situation, Chu Xiao scolded angrily. You're crazy. Great Elder, we're not crazy. This is our only choice now. Third Elder was not frightened by Chu Xiao's anger at all, and his expression did not change. Our Chu family has been declining all these years, and our situation is not good. It wasn't easy to nurture Chu Xianmin, but she's basically useless now. Now that we finally have a top talent like Chu Luiyue, we have no reason not to seize the opportunity, right? No matter what, she's someone that Vice Admiral Mu thinks highly of. What's wrong with us lowering our heads? When she becomes successful in the future, it'll be many times harder for us to do all this. The third Elder's words immediately drew everyone's agreement. Everyone discussed fervently, implying that they hoped Chu Xiao would be the representative to apologize to Chu Ning and his daughter and invite them back to the Chu family. Chu Xiao was annoyed. Say whatever you want. If you want to build a relationship with Chu Luiyue, go ahead. In any case, this old man will definitely not go. Third elder smiled faintly. Great elder, you're so stubborn. I wonder what the head of the family will think when he comes out and finds out about this. Chu Xiao's expression froze. He had almost forgotten about this. The head of the family had been in seclusion for too long, and he had already regarded himself as the head of the Chu family. Although third elder's words were unpleasant, they were not without reason. He could ignore the others, but not the head of the family. It would be hard for him to explain himself then. After hesitating for a long time, Chu Xiao's expression changed several times before he finally agreed. Give Chu Luiyue. Forget it. Give Chu Ning an invitation and say that we have something to discuss with him. Chu Luiyue entered Joyo Tower again. As she had already broken through to stage 2, she easily ascended to the second floor this time. The Qingjiao competition had just ended, so not many students came to Joyo Tower. Chu Luiyue simply walked around the second floor and realized that there wasn't much of a difference here other than having a stronger force. She randomly found a room and started cultivating. Not long after she sat down, Chu Luiyue heard a sharp and hoarse roar. That sound came closer and closer, and it gradually became clearer. The powerful suppression also became more and more terrifying. Chu Luiyue even felt as if the blood in her body had solidified. Screech! That screech seemed to be right beside her ear, and it almost pierced her eardrums. Chu Luiyue suddenly opened her eyes. But this time, she suddenly saw a pair of scarlet and sharp eyes in front of her. That pair of eyes was burning with raging flames. They covered the sky and covered the earth. Digression, I sincerely apologize to everyone. I had been running around outside today, and then I had to entertain my friends at night. I thought that I would come back to write after a simple meal, but I didn't expect that there would be so many delays, and I couldn't abandon my friends and come back alone. I feel very guilty. I'll update later. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 286. Hong Yao tilted its head to one side, making it clear that it didn't want to talk to Mu Qinghe. Mu Qinghe stared at Hong Yao. Your temper is getting worse and worse. Hong Yao glared at her with tears in its eyes. When she was here before, she never dared to treat it like this. Only a short time had passed, but its life was getting worse and worse. It had suffered enough in the past year. Mu Qinghe was such a stupid master. The more Hong Yao thought about it, the angrier it became. It couldn't wait to go back and find Chu Luiyue. But it knew that Mu Qinghe would definitely not agree. Besides, that guy was still here, its fur had been plucked off. Bang! Hong Yao was so angry that it simply lay straight on the ground. I won't go. I can't live like this. Mu Qinghe's eyes twitched. It's useless for you to throw a tantrum. Hong Yao didn't move. It was determined not to go with him. It might as well just let it die. Thinking of how it was injured by a beast that had been imprisoned for many years when it went out yesterday, Hong Yao felt ashamed. And today, it was treated like this by Mu Qinghe. It couldn't live like this. Mu Qinghe closed his eyes hard and tried to control his emotions, lest he accidentally killed his demonic beast. Who hurt you? If you are willing to tell me, I can help you take revenge. Hong Yao's eyes moved, but its body was still tense. It thought for a while and was in a dilemma. You can even get injured in such a place. It seems that you haven't been diligent in cultivation during this period of time. Mu Qinghe's following words successfully made Hong Yao give up the idea of asking him for help. A green flame ignited on its body, burning away the remaining bloodstains. Mu Qinghe raised his eyebrows and was a little surprised. Hong Yao had always liked to make trouble outside and then let him clean up the mess. He didn't expect it to be so courageous today. Since you don't want to tell me, I'll ask another question. Mu Qinghe's eyes were as sharp as a substance. He stared at Hong Yao, as if he wanted to see through it. Just now in the main hall, you, Vice Admiral Mu. Before Mu Qinghe could finish her sentence, she was suddenly interrupted by a clear female voice. He turned around and saw that it was Chu Luyue. What a coincidence. Mu Qinghe's expression changed and she glanced at Hong Yao. The red demon lying on the ground suddenly froze. It's over. He had been seen. This was too embarrassing. Without thinking, it flew up from the ground and rushed up. Then, it circled around Mu Qinghe, not forgetting to dive down to the ground in the middle, pretending that it was also around Mu Qinghe. From afar, it looked like a jubilant butterfly. Mu Qinghe was speechless. Chu Luyue walked closer and asked in a surprised tone. Vice Admiral Mu, your magic beast looks really lively. Yes, he was still as good as ever. His ability to play dead and act shamelessly was still the same as before. Mu Qinghe was speechless. Hong Yao, who was flying excitedly, suddenly felt embarrassed. For a moment, it didn't know whether it should continue to fly. It staggered and almost fell from the air. In the end, it could only lower its head and accept its fate. What's the matter? Mu Qinghe coughed, but there was still no expression on her face. Chu Luyue smiled faintly. There is one thing I want to ask you for help with. I don't know if you are willing to agree. Say it. According to Mu Qinghe's character, she was never interested in this kind of thing. If it was before today, he would definitely not say a word when Chu Luyue talked to him like this. But thinking of Hong Yao's reaction to her, Mu Qinghe felt that maybe she should find an opportunity to get to know Chu Luyue more. Chu Luyue bowed. I have a friend whose mother has been ill for many years. Her condition has worsened recently. I wonder if Vice Admiral Mu can help. You will definitely be very grateful. Mu Qinghe frowned. Your friend. Chu Luyue nodded. Mu Hongyu. She is country Yao Chen's Princess Yong'en. Mu Qinghe didn't care if Mu Hongyu was a princess or not. Even if it was Emperor Zhouan, he might not be willing to help. However, Hong Yao and you hit it off very well. For its sake, I can help you. Chu Luyue looked surprised and looked at Hong Yao. Then, I really have to thank Hong Yao. Her red lips moved slightly as she softly called out its name. She was the one who named Hong Yao. Back then, when Mu Qinghe was hunting fiends, she coincidentally obtained Hong Yao, but she didn't know what to call it. Chu Luyue thought that it was a green sparrow, and Mu Qinghe also had the word Qing in her name. Thus, they were considered to be fated. Hence, he purposely gave it the opposite name, Hong Yao. Now, when he called out this name again, things had changed. Hong Yao was stunned and instinctively wanted to fly toward Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue glanced at it. The human and fiend looked at each other, and undercurrents surged. Hong Yao suddenly paused. I don't seem to want to now. It stared at Chu Luyue and couldn't wait to run over and complain to Mu Qinghe. Dumpling squatted on Chu Luyue's shoulder and stared at it warily. Hong Yao felt a dull pain at the spot where the feathers were plucked off. After hesitating for a long time, it finally didn't go over and could only bury its head under its wings. No one saw the tears rolling down its cheeks, all of them falling into its feathers. After a while, its wings were wet. Seeing it like this, Chu Luyue felt very sorry for it. Hong Yao had always been arrogant and often made a lot of trouble. But when it was really sad, it would only bury its head in its wings and cry, just like now. How could she not want to hug Hong Yao? Since her rebirth, everything she thought of in her previous life was like a dream. All the true feelings were fake, and all the loyalty was betrayal. In the end, Hong Yao was the only one who missed her. Seeing Hong Yao like this, she felt that the pain that went deep into her bones was a little comforted. But now was not a good time. Mu Qing has said, I will stay here for a while. Let her come here. I will send a celestial physician to treat her. As the Deputy General of the Black Cavalry, he had great power. It was not difficult for him to mobilize a few celestial physicians. Chu Luiyue looked away with a polite and eager smile on her face. Thank you, Vice Admiral Mu. After saying that, she asked hesitantly, but Vice Admiral Mu means that you won't leave immediately? Didn't he come here to pick people with the Daijing Yuan Meridian? Apart from that, was there something else? Mu Qinghe replied with a faint but didn't say anything else. Chu Luiyue knew that she wasn't qualified to ask so much now, so she didn't say anything and just curtsied. In that case, Liu won't waste your time. I'll take my leave first. After saying that, she took a step back and turned to leave. Stop. Mu Qinghe suddenly said. Chu Luiyue stopped in her tracks, turned around, and asked with a smile, Vice Admiral Mu, is there anything else? Digression, when I go out today, it will probably be very late. Don't wait during the day. Let's read it together at night. So how much do you owe now? Woo, mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 287. Dumpling nodded vigorously. Chu Luiyue was speechless. This was already the 4th floor, and only stage 4 warriors could come up here. Looking around, it was empty. In the entire academy, there were less than 10 students who had reached stage 4. And there were no stage 5 warriors. Not a single one. Chu Ning was also a stage 5 warrior. Cultivators who could reach this level could be considered powerful in the entire country Yaoqin. It was obvious that there shouldn't be anyone above the 5th floor. Now it was hard to figure out how Tuanzi could pass through the barrier of the floor so easily. Chu Luiyue was most worried about something else. If they came up so quietly, would they alert Elder Wei Yun, who was guarding Jiuyou Tower? Jiuyou Tower was very important to Tianlu Academy. If they really caused a commotion and were discovered, it would be difficult for her to explain herself. Seeing that Chu Luiyue was standing there in deep thought and didn't seem to have any intention of following her, Dumpling couldn't wait any longer and turned around, heading straight for the 5th floor. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly as she watched Dumpling fly to the barrier on the 5th floor. Although there was still a distance between them, Chu Luiyue could clearly feel the suppression above. It was much stronger than the one on the 4th floor. Perhaps the suppression on the 5th floor could stop Dumpling. If Jiuyou Tower was really so easy to get into, it wouldn't make sense, right? Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue calmed down a little as she stood on the spot and watched quietly. However, her fantasy was shattered very quickly. That strong barrier didn't stop Dumpling at all. It passed through it easily as if it was entering an uninhabited land. Seeing Dumpling happily wagging her tail at her, Chu Luiyue was silent for a while. She seemed to have underestimated this blood ferret that she had casually picked up. After hesitating for a long time, Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and finally decided to follow Dumpling up. Since they had already come this far, she wanted to see what it was that had attracted Dumpling. In fact, there was another thing she wanted to clarify. When she first came to Jiuyou Tower and pushed the door open, the ferocious beasts carved on the door seemed to have come alive. Ever since she started cultivating here, she had heard that strange sound more than once. Although Chu Luiyue didn't know what kind of magical beast was imprisoned under Jiuyou Tower, she was certain that the magical beast was targeting her. Thinking of this, she made up her mind and stretched out her hand in front of the barrier. Dumpling immediately hugged her hand happily and easily crossed the barrier with her. Looking at the lively Dumpling and his unharmed body, Chu Luiyue pursed his lips and looked up. The staircase spiraled up to the top. However, each layer of barriers was like layers of fog, concealing everything and making it impossible to see anything clearly. A question suddenly flashed across Chu Luiyue's mind. Since only stage 5 warriors could go up to the 5th level, did the top few levels have the same rules? For example, only stage 7 warriors could go up to the 7th level. However, there were no cultivators outside Heaven's canopy who could break through to this level. If that was the case, then what was the point of the top few levels of Joyo Tower? One had to know that in the entire country Yaoqin, the strongest was only a stage 5 warrior. There wasn't even a stage 6 warrior. In other words, with Joyo Tower here, everyone could only go up to the 5th level at most. Who placed such a powerful Joyo Tower here? Chu Luiyue recalled that Bai Qin had specially introduced Joyo Tower when she was in the academy. However, at that time, he only mentioned that the pit of heavenly origins was under Joyo Tower, so the density of force in the tower was much better than the outside world. However, he didn't say anything else. A large part of the reason why Chu Luiyue wanted to enter Tianlu Academy was because of Joyo Tower. However, she now felt that there were too many secrets buried in Joyo Tower. She looked at Dumpling. Shall we continue? When Chu Luiyue entered Joyo Tower and broke through the 5th barrier, Rongxiu had just returned to Yifeng Courtyard from Prince Li's mansion. Yan Qing followed closely behind and quickly reported the day's events to Rongxiu. Rongxiu lay down on the rattan chair. His expression was calm, and no one could tell if he was happy or angry. Has the time been set? Yan Qing bowed. Not yet. From what Vice Admiral Mu said, it seems like he will be staying here for a while. He also seems to be planning to test Miss Lu Yu again. He will only bring Miss Lu Yu to the Tianling dynasty after she passes all of them. Rongxiu's lips curled into a faint smile. Of course, he won't go back immediately. Mu Qinghe came here because she had other important matters to attend to. You said that she was the one who mentioned that she had a Daijing Yuan meridian? Rongxiu asked calmly. Yan Qing bowed and replied respectfully, yes. Yes. Rongxiu remained silent for a while. He crossed his fingers, and his eyes darkened slightly. It seems like she really wants to go. Yan Qing sensed that something was wrong with her master's aura. She hesitated for a while and said, to the people of country Yaoqin, it's a great opportunity to go to the Tianling dynasty. It's reasonable for Miss Lu Yu to want to go. Besides, Miss Lu Yu is very talented. It's a pity for her to stay here. Rongxiu closed his eyes gently. Of course, he knew this. However, he was more concerned about something else. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and looked in the direction of Joyo Tower. Yan Qing was shocked. Master, what's wrong? Rongxiu frowned slightly. Someone barged into the 6th floor of Joyo Tower. Yan Qing was shocked. Wasn't the 6th floor of Joyo Tower only accessible to stage 6 warriors? No one in the entire Imperial city could do it, let alone Tianlu Academy, right? Master, could it be those? Rongxiu raised his hand and narrowed his eyes before Yan Qing could finish her sentence. No. He found that aura very familiar. It's her. His expression changed slightly, and he immediately rushed toward Joyo Tower. Why did she enter Joyo Tower at this time? On the other side, Chu Luiyue looked back and still couldn't believe that she had reached the 6th floor just like that. With Dumpling leading the way, she didn't encounter any obstacles. If she hadn't experienced it herself, Chu Luiyue wouldn't have believed that she could reach the top few floors of Joyo Tower in such a way. She looked around and saw that there was no one around. The space here was much smaller than the first floor, but the force was more concentrated. If she cultivated here, she would definitely get twice the result with half the effort. However, at the same time, the rich force was mixed with all kinds of impurities, which made people flinch. However, she still couldn't find any trace of the fiend here. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and looked up. Could it be even higher up? Digression, I'll update slowly in the afternoon after eating. Love mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 288. Chu Luiyue looked at Dumpling. Dumpling, are you going to stop? This is already the 6th floor. It was obvious that only stage 7 warriors could go further up. Dumpling blinked and looked up again, seemingly puzzled by Chu Luiyue's question. There was nothing here, so of course they had to continue going up. Chu Luiyue held her breath for a moment and finally said, "Okay. If you can go up, I'll go with you." Tuanzi wagged its tail happily and turned around, intending to go to the 7th floor. Chu Luiyue looked down and saw that there seemed to be no end to the spiral staircase. Suddenly, her gaze froze, and she looked at her feet. There was actually a drop of dried blood there. As it was dark red and fell at the edge, she didn't see it when she came up from below. This was the 6th level. Who would be able to come here and leave behind a trail of blood? She bent down and took a closer look, frowning slightly. According to her experience, this drop of blood seemed to have been left not long ago. It was very likely that it was left in the past 2 days. Who could it be? Chu Luiyue stretched out her hand, wiped the blood gently, and looked at it carefully. A familiar aura hit her in the face. She was stunned. This seemed to be. She immediately looked around the drop of blood again. After searching carefully, she finally saw a green feather in an inconspicuous corner. She immediately recognized that it was Hong Yao's feather with just one look. Hong Yao has been here. Chu Luiyue was shocked, and then she suddenly remembered that when she saw Hong Yao previously, there was blood under its wings. It seemed to be injured. At that time, she was immersed in the shock that Hong Yao actually recognized her, so she didn't pay attention to it. Now that she thought about it, it was indeed strange. As a 7th grade fiend, Hong Yao was very powerful. Being able to injure it showed that the other party wasn't easy to deal with. More importantly, there shouldn't be such an existence in country Yao Qin. From the looks of it, Hong Yao had barged into Joyo Tower and was injured here. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but think of that ferocious magical beast. Seeing that Chu Luiyue didn't follow her, Dumpling chased after her. When it saw the green feather in Chu Luiyue's hand, a look of disdain flashed across its eyes. As expected, he was useless. He was actually injured here. Chu Luiyue glanced at it. Dumpling, Hong Yao is injured here. Are you sure you want to continue? Even Hong Yao had suffered a loss, so she and Dumpling might not be a match for him. Hearing this, Dumpling's face immediately scrunched up. How could that green sparrow compare to it? Chu Luiyue saw that it was very stubborn, so she couldn't help but sigh. If you run into trouble later, I can't help you. It might even become a burden to her. Dumpling stepped forward angrily and threw away the green feather. Then, it hugged Chu Luiyue's hand and walked up. She had made up her mind. Chu Luiyue had no choice but to secretly take out the crystal barrier, ready to deal with any sudden situations. The human and beast continued to walk toward the 7th floor. Chu Luiyue already felt as if something heavy was pressing down on her body, and every step she took was extremely heavy. If not for Dumpling, she probably wouldn't have been able to continue. Finally, the two of them reached the barrier on the 7th floor. Unlike the transparent barriers from before, the one in front of him was actually a bright silver. The brilliance flowed, and it looked as brilliant as the galaxy. However, Chu Luiyue was not in the mood to admire it at this moment. She stood stiffly in front of the barrier, and the blood in her body seemed to have solidified. Only her heart was beating wildly. She took a deep breath, and then slowly stretched out her hand and reached forward. Dumpling sat on the back of her hand, and its round eyes were wide open, looking excitedly and expectantly at the flickering silver barrier in front of it. Chu Luiyue could clearly see her fingers slowly sinking into the silver barrier. The silver barrier was solid, and Chu Luiyue could even clearly feel the strong resistance. This time, it was as if she had plunged into a quagmire. Soon, Chu Luiyue felt as if there was a force crazily dragging her, trying to pull her in. Her heart trembled, and she subconsciously tried to pull her hand out. However, the force also grew rapidly, and it swallowed even more of her hand. Very quickly, the flowing light had already pulled her entire hand into it. Dumpling's body was halfway in. At this moment, a ball of black karmic fire suddenly rushed out of the barrier. A burning pain suddenly assaulted him. Chu Luiyue immediately wanted to retreat. But at this moment, she was already trapped within the silver barrier. She could not move. In an instant, the black karmic fire had spread to Chu Luiyue's body, and surrounded her. Chu Luiyue immediately threw out the crystal barrier. However, she soon realized that the crystal barrier did not have any effect. Because one of her hands had sunk into the silver barrier, the crystal barrier could not pass through the barrier, and could not completely protect her. Helpless, she could only put away the crystal barrier, and began to think of other ways. The blazing flames made her feel as if her entire body was burning. She could even smell something burning. However, at this moment, Dumpling's body had been completely swallowed by the flowing light. Chu Luiyue realized that her hand, which had been swallowed by the barrier, was completely numb and had lost all feeling. Therefore, at this moment, she had lost all sense of Dumpling. Dumpling! Chu Luiyue raised her voice and shouted. However, Dumpling did not respond. At this moment, the black karmic fire had completely spread over the entire barrier. Chu Luiyue stood there as if she was in hell. Just as she was feeling extremely anxious, she suddenly heard a clear sound. Kacha! Her heart jumped, and she immediately focused her gaze. She saw that the black karmic fire in front of her had suddenly encountered something terrifying, and was rapidly retreating from the center. A crack had appeared on the barrier that was flickering with light. Chu Luiyue's brows furrowed, and in the next moment, she saw that the crack had expanded again. Crash! The barrier shattered. A small claw suddenly reached out from within. It was Dumpling. Chu Luiyue's heart relaxed. Then, she saw Dumpling grab the edge of the shattered barrier, and forcefully break it. Kacha! A bright and colorful barrier was actually broken like a piece of broken ice by it. Chu Luiyue suddenly had a premonition. Indeed, in the next moment, she heard the crisp sound of something being bitten. Kacha! Kacha kacha! Gulp! Through the hole in the middle, Chu Luiyue could clearly see Dumpling stuffing the last bit of the barrier into her mouth, chewing and swallowing. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 289. This scene was all too familiar. However, Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat uncontrollably when she saw it. How could Dumpling eat this? Previously, when it ate Hing Jingchua's force, she thought it was already shocking enough. She did not expect it to be able to eat a barrier that was full of pressure so easily. This was not an osmanthus cake. Because she was too shocked, Chu Luiyue could not say a word for a while. She could only watch in a daze as Dumpling broke off another piece and put it into its mouth. Chu Luiyue even saw that there was still a black karmic fire on the barrier that had yet to burn. However, Dumpling did not seem to care at all. Because it was careless, a strand of its beard was burned off. Fortunately, it changed its angle in time and successfully put the thing into its mouth and ate it happily. The black karmic fire around it was still burning wildly, but Chu Luiyue suddenly felt that this thing did not seem to be so powerful. No matter how strong it was, wasn't it still eaten by Dumpling? Looking at Dumpling diligently breaking off another piece, the corner of her eyes twitched. If other people saw this scene, they would be so shocked that their jaws would drop. Dumpling, is it delicious? In the end, she could not help but ask. Dumpling heard her and stopped. It looked at her with bright eyes and nodded furiously. Delicious. Super delicious. It was much better than Heng Jingchua's Moon Devourer. Compared to this, what it ate before was rubbish. Chu Luiyue was shocked by its enthusiastic reaction, and the corner of her eyes twitched uncontrollably. So what exactly did she bring back? After the previous few incidents, Chu Luiyue had already guessed that Dumpling was not an ordinary blood ferret. It was even different from other magical beasts. She had never heard of any magical beast that consumed origin power as food. She did not notice it before, but later she realized that Dumpling did not seem to like to eat. What it loved the most was origin power, and it was the kind that came in large clumps. Just like this silver barrier. This thing was also condensed from origin power and contained an extremely powerful suppressive might. Chu Luiyue had no doubt that this barrier could indeed stop cultivators below rank 7. Therefore, Dumpling's behavior now looked even more strange. As Dumpling ate crazily, the hole in the barrier grew bigger and bigger. The black karmic fire that was spreading wantonly seemed to have sensed that something was wrong and retreated. However, Dumpling was even faster. She devoured the flaming barrier piece by piece. Chu Luiyue watched quietly, the waves in his heart unable to calm down for a long time. That originally extremely tall silver barrier was quickly reduced to rubble. In the end, it was completely destroyed by Dumpling. As for the hand that had been swallowed, it had been freed at some point. After finishing the last bite, Dumpling finally rubbed her round belly and burped in satisfaction. Burp, Chu Luiyue was speechless. If Heng Jingchua could see this scene, he should be able to rest in peace. In this world, how many people's origin power could receive the same treatment as this powerful barrier? From the looks of it, Dumpling was willing to swallow that ball of origin power because she was compromising. Chu Luiyue looked at the broken barrier in front of him and did not recover for a long time. After a while, he looked at Dumpling faintly. Dumpling, tell me honestly. Did you come here just to eat this? Dumpling suddenly sneezed. Achoo! Chu Luiyue was speechless. She seemed to be guilty. Chu Luiyue held his forehead helplessly. The 7th level's barrier was eaten by Dumpling just like that. This matter would definitely attract the attention of the elders in the academy. It might not even take long for them to rush over. Of course, whether or not they could reach this level was another matter. But if others found out, she felt that she really could not explain it. Did she have to tell everyone that she was brought up by Dumpling and that it was also the one who ate this barrier? Dumpling saw that Chu Luiyue seemed to be very troubled, so it quickly flew over and threw itself into her arms, rubbing against her ingratiatingly. Chu Luiyue's neck tickled and she could not help but laugh. She pulled Dumpling down, annoyed and amused. Don't act cute. Tell me, what should we do now? How was she going to explain such a big hole? Dumpling blinked and thought for a long time. Then, it stretched out its paw and pointed upwards. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched violently, and an even more ominous premonition attacked her heart. You still want to go up? Dumpling heard a hint of threat in her voice and nodded timidly. How far were they? If they did not go up, wouldn't they have made this trip in vain? Chu Luiyue's hands trembled slightly, and she kept chanting in her heart. This is my fiend. If I kill it, it will be gone. This is my fiend. If I kill it, it will be gone. This is my fiend. But I don't want to die. Chu Liyue finally could not hold it in anymore and pinched its chubby cheeks harshly. Dumpling, do you know that your master only has one life? If it's gone just like that, it will really be gone. Tuanzi blinked its eyes and then clasped its paws together. It bowed obediently with its hands folded in front, looking eager to please. Chu Liyue closed her eyes. Go. When the 7th level's barrier was eaten by Tuanzi, Elder Wei Yun, who was dozing off in his chair outside Joyo Tower, suddenly opened his eyes. He looked up at Joyo Tower in shock. This commotion was not right. He had been guarding Joyo Tower for many years, but he had never felt such a commotion. For the past half a year, Joyo Tower had some strange movements from time to time, but it had always been within their control. Thus, even the dean did not take it to heart. But now, boom! The door of Joyo Tower suddenly opened. Several figures were thrown out one after another by a powerful force. They were the students who were cultivating in Joyo Tower. Cries of surprise were incessant. Clearly, these people had not realized what had happened. Some of them could not withstand the impact of this force and even vomited blood. They were extremely pathetic. Elder Wei Yun's heart was in his mouth. For so many years, such a situation had never happened in Joyo Tower. He abruptly stood up and slapped the black jade stone in front of him without any hesitation. A bright light pillar shot up to the sky. Joyo Tower has changed. Other than teachers and elders, all students retreat. Elder Wei Yun shouted sternly. His voice spread far and wide. When the students who were chased out of Joyo Tower heard this, they were all shocked and hurriedly retreated. At the same time, everyone else in the college also saw the light pillar. Level 1 alert. What happened in Joyo Tower? Digression, I'm going out tonight. I don't know when the 5th watch will be updated. Everyone, don't wait. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from love. Chapter 290. Rong Xiu, who was walking toward Joyo Tower, frowned when he saw the light pillar. He was still a step too late. She had already reached the 7th floor. He quickened his pace and walked forward. Yan Qing followed behind. She was also shocked when she saw the commotion and didn't dare to say a word. Miss Lu Yu is too daring. She actually caused such a huge commotion in Joyo Tower. The two of them walked forward and soon met the students who were retreating. Prince Li. The girls were shocked when they saw Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu was expressionless as he lightly nodded and continued walking forward. Prince Li, it's dangerous ahead. The girls looked at each other and hurriedly rushed in front of Rong Xiu, wanting to stop him. Rong Xiu quietly looked at the few of them. His expression was calm to the extreme, but those women felt a chill run up from the soles of their feet, rushing straight to their heads. Their joy and excitement from meeting Rong Xiu quickly faded. They looked at each other, and their faces turned pale. This Prince Li's aura is not ordinary. Yan Qing immediately said, Prince Li has something important to do. His Highness has important matters to attend to, so please do not delay. The girls came back to their senses and hurriedly stepped aside. Rong Xiu walked forward and didn't even look at her. The girls hesitated for a while and couldn't help but shout, Prince Li. Joyo Tower has changed. It's the most dangerous time for you to go there now. Elder Wei Yun has already ordered everyone to evacuate. It's better if you don't go. Rong Xiu was unmoved and continued walking forward. Yan Qing felt helpless. Can't these people tell that Master has made up his mind to go? If they obstruct him and delay his matters, it would be dangerous for them. Yan Qing turned around and scanned the girls. Princely knows what he's doing. The women's faces turned even paler, and they didn't dare to say anything more. Gradually, more and more students began to evacuate. Everyone was moving away from Jiuyou Tower, and only Rong Xiu went against the flow. Many people were surprised to see him. Why did the frail princely come here at this time? And it looks a little different from before. Some people couldn't help but remind her, but Yan Qing blocked them all. Rong Xiu finally arrived in front of Jiuyou Tower. Elder Wei Yun was anxiously looking at Jiuyou Tower when he unintentionally turned his head and saw Rong Xiu walking over. His brows were tightly knitted together. Rong Xiu, why are you here at this time? Now that all the students had been evacuated, the elders and teachers would come to deal with it. You should leave as soon as possible. There are still people inside. Rong Xiu interrupted him. Elder Wei Yun was stunned. Just as he was about to ask who it was, his heart suddenly lit up. Yes. And Chu Luyue. He had actually almost forgotten about her. He remembered that when she came in the afternoon, he even congratulated her. Thinking back, Chu Luyue wasn't among the students who came out just now. She was still inside. How did this happen? Jiuyou Tower changed, and all the students were expelled. Why is Chu Luyue the only one left? Elder Wei Yun also became nervous. Chu Luyue had taken first place twice in the Qingjiao competition just now. She was undoubtedly the top genius in their academy. If anything happened to her, they wouldn't be able to bear the loss. Rong Xiu looked up at Jiuyou Tower. I'll go in and bring her out. Elder Wei Yun gritted his teeth and immediately rushed in. But at this moment, Jiuyou Tower's door slammed shut with a bang. It blocked Elder Wei Yun outside. Elder Wei Yun widened his eyes. This, isn't Chu Luyue completely trapped in Jiuyou Tower? He tried to open the door, but it didn't budge at all. Elder Wei Yun then realized that the situation was more serious than he had imagined. What's going on? Just as he was feeling extremely anxious, Sun Zhongyan and the rest finally arrived. Elder Wei Yun quickly explained the situation to them. There were no signs when Jiuyou Tower changed. I don't know what's going on. The door can't be opened now. Sun Zhongyan frowned and asked. Is there anyone inside? Elder Wei Yun swallowed his saliva with difficulty. Chu Luyue is still inside. What? Sun Zhongyan was shocked and immediately looked at Jiuyou Tower with a frown. Then, he crossed his arms in front of him. Rays of light intertwined, and a Xian formation quickly appeared. At the same time, spots of starlight appeared around Jiuyou Tower. That was the Xian formation set up on Jiuyou Tower. Sun Zhongyan looked at the Xian formation in front of him carefully. That's not right. There's no trace of her in Jiuyou Tower. This Xian formation was connected to Jiuyou Tower. Even if they couldn't enter, they could see something from the Xian formation. Sun Zhongyan looked at it for a while, but he couldn't sense Chu Luyue's presence. Elder Wei Yun was puzzled. Impossible. She went in the afternoon, and all the other students came out together. She was the only one who didn't come out. She should still be inside. Sun Zhongyan held his breath and checked the Xian formation again. He still shook his head. Still nothing. Everyone looked at each other and fell silent. This situation was too strange. Elder Wei Yun anxiously paced around in circles. Why can't we find her? She's clearly inside. Rong Xiu suddenly said. Elder Sun, which level can your Xian formation see? Sun Zhongyan was stunned and instinctively replied. 5 levels. This Xian formation has been with Jiuyou Tower for many years, and it has always been able to see 5 levels. You mean? A ridiculous thought flashed across Sun Zhongyan's mind. Could it be that Chu Luyue isn't on the 5 levels below? That's impossible. Sun Zhongyan blurted out. No one in Tianlu Academy has ever been able to go above the 5th level. How could she? Halfway through his words, his voice abruptly stopped. Other than this explanation, he couldn't find any other answers. Also, Juyo Tower's sudden change seemed very wrong. Everyone fell into dead silence. Suddenly, a scream came from the crowd. Look! That door! Everyone looked over, and they were all shocked. They saw that the engraved lines on Juyo Tower's door suddenly jumped. In the blink of an eye, it turned into black karmic fire. It burned fiercely. How could this be? Sun Zhongyan opened his eyes wide and muttered in disbelief. While everyone was still in shock, the fire had already spread rapidly. In an instant, the entire first level of Juyo Tower was surrounded by the black karmic fire. Roar! An extremely ferocious roar suddenly sounded from Juyo Tower. It reverberated through the heavens. Digression, I rushed it out with all my might. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 291. Everyone was horrified. What is that? Why were there cries of fiends coming from Juyo Tower? Only Sun Zhongyan was frowning, and his wrinkled face was scrunched up. All Xian masters, listen up. Activate the locking heaven formation. Everyone else, evacuate immediately. Once those words were spoken, everyone looked at Sun Zhongyan in shock. The locking heaven formation was the sealing formation of Juyo Tower, and it had never been activated for thousands of years. Now, no one knew what would happen after the locking heaven formation was activated. Elder Sun, can't the locking heaven formation only be activated by the president? Bai Chen asked hurriedly. Sun Zhongyan's face was solemn. I've already informed Uncle Master. I hope he can come out of seclusion as soon as possible. But Juyo Tower has changed, and the situation is critical. We can't delay. We have to activate the locking heaven formation immediately. Uncle Master has already entrusted the locking heaven formation to me, so I can activate it too. As he spoke, he flipped his wrist, and a silver needle appeared in his palm. At first glance, the silver needle looked no different from an ordinary silver needle. But if one looked closer, they would see exquisite patterns engraved on it. In fact, the patterns on it were exactly the same as the patterns on Juyo Tower's door. Hearing Sun Zhongyan's words, everyone knew that this was the only way now. No one knew when the president would come, but Juyo Tower's situation couldn't wait any longer. Seeing the silver needle in Sun Zhongyan's hand, everyone felt more at ease. Elder Sun, please give us your orders. Sun Zhongyan rose into the air. He threw the silver needle in his hand. The silver needle grew in the wind and rapidly expanded to the size of a person's arm. From afar, it looked like a silver pestle. Then, the silver pestle landed right above Juyo Tower. It spun rapidly. Locking heaven formation, activate. Sun Zhongyan shouted, and countless silver lights flew out of his hand. They all poured into the silver pestle. The next moment, a buzzing sound was heard. The patterns on the silver pestle suddenly lit up. Swoosh! A silver dot of light flew out and landed in a certain location. Sun Zhongyan said, Bai Chen. Shi-san. Without saying a word, Bai Chen immediately flew over and stood on top of the star. Swoosh! A second silver light quickly appeared and flew to the other side. Wen Yen. Nan Qi. Chen Xiao. Dong Lu. Qi Gao. Bei Si. Sun Zhongyan quickly gave the order, and all the Xian masters moved out. A huge Xian formation quickly appeared in the sky above Joyo Tower. Countless silver lines flew out from the silver pestle and intertwined with each other. Starlight flickered on them and spread out like stars on a chessboard. All the mystic cultivators also spread out and prepared to attack. The heaven ceiling formation was a level 6 Xian formation, and no Xian master in the academy could activate it alone. Therefore, they could only work together. When everyone was in position, Sun Zhongyan shouted in a deep voice. Activate! As soon as he said that, all the Xian cultivators moved at the same time and poured their origin power into the starlight beneath their feet. Streams of light flew out and flowed along the huge interweaving lines in the air. They were all gathered in the silver pestle. Wang! A vast pressure descended. Above Joyo Tower, the locking sky formation was activated. Below Joyo Tower, the other teachers had already begun to evacuate. At a time like this, the only thing they could do was to ensure the safety of everyone in the academy. Rongxiu! Let's go! Elder Wei Yun saw that Rongxiu was still standing at the same spot and thought that he hadn't reacted yet, so he hurriedly advised him. It's very dangerous here. You can't stay here. Given Joyo Tower's current situation, no one could say for sure what would happen. The heaven ceiling formation had already been activated, and the pressure was extremely strong. When the two forces collided, the people standing at the side would bear the brunt of it. Rongxiu didn't have much cultivation, and his body was weak. How could he withstand such a crushing force? If anything happened to Rongxiu, they wouldn't be able to explain it to His Majesty. However, Rongxiu didn't seem to hear anything and only looked up at the 7th level of Joyo Tower. Rongxiu! Elder Wei Yun shouted again, but Rongxiu still didn't respond. He couldn't help but become more anxious. When he turned back, the black karmic fire had already completely surrounded the 1st level of Joyo Tower, and the door was completely sealed. What was even more worrying was that it didn't have any intention of stopping and was spreading toward the 2nd level. The scorching flames had already started to ignite the surroundings. The air was so hot that it could almost burn people. Elder Wei Yun was burning with anxiety. He had to control this fire as soon as possible. Otherwise, once it spread, the consequences would be unimaginable. Qing! Take him away quickly. Elder Wei Yun had no choice but to shout at Qing. Qing looked up, glanced at Elder Wei Yun, and shook his head firmly. Elder Wei Yun, please forgive me. Qing has always been obedient to His Highness. Since His Highness wanted to stay here, he naturally had to follow. Even if he knew that it was very dangerous, he had no other choice. Because that person was in even more danger now. If anything happened to Chu Luyue, Qing didn't dare to imagine what his master would do. Elder Wei Yun couldn't help but curse in his heart when he saw that the master and servant didn't listen to him at all. These two fools. Everyone else had already left. Were they really going to stay here and wait for death? Boom! A bowl of black karmic fire suddenly rose. It actually shot straight up to the 3rd level. Elder Wei Yun wasn't paying attention and was hit by the blast. He lost his balance and took a few steps back. Screech! The fiend's screech sounded again. Everyone's mind was shaken. The entire school seemed to be enveloped in this fierce and shrill screech. Elder Wei Yun's blood was in turmoil, and he almost spat out blood. He looked up at Joyo Tower in shock. What kind of fiend was suppressed in there? It was actually so powerful. It was just a screech, but it actually had such a frightening aura. At the same time, even the students and teachers who had retreated far away were somewhat affected. They widened their eyes in shock as they looked at Joyo Tower. Their hearts were in turmoil. Gosh! Joyo Tower is actually burning. What exactly is going on? Old Sun and the rest actually activated the locking heaven formation. This is the first time in 1,000 years, right? Weren't the few of you still cultivating in Joyo Tower previously? Do you know what exactly is going on? How would we know? Everything was fine before. Suddenly, there was a huge force that chased us out. We didn't even have time to react. Luckily, you all came out. If you were still inside, I'm afraid, wait. I just heard from Elder Wei Yun that Chu Luiyue seems to still be inside. What? Then, isn't she? Everyone looked at each other and fell silent. Chu Luiyue is most likely doomed this time. On the other side, Elder Wei Yun finally caught his breath. Suddenly, he saw a tall figure striding toward Joyo Tower. He was shocked. Rongxiu. Stop right there. However, Rongxiu didn't stop and continued forward without hesitation. In an instant, the black karmic fire enveloped him and swallowed him. Digression, I'm staying at my friend's house. She's still sleeping, and I'm sitting on the bay window quietly typing. I think it's better to read it at night. Updates will drop from time to time. I'm in debt again and again. Too much debt is no burden. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 292. Rongxiu is really crazy. This thought flashed across Elder Wei Yun's mind. Joyo Tower is so dangerous now. Not only did Rongxiu not leave, but he even barged in. Isn't he courting death? He gritted his teeth and rushed forward, wanting to bring Rongxiu out. But a ball of black karmic fire suddenly exploded in front of him. It blocked Elder Wei Yun outside. He hurriedly turned around and saw that Yan Qing didn't follow Rongxiu in. He was about to call out to Yan Qing when Yan Qing suddenly turned around and left. She disappeared in the blink of an eye. Elder Wei Yun couldn't care less now. He had no choice but to fly into the air and say to Sun Zhongyan, Rongxiu has gone into Joyo Tower. Sun Zhongyan frowned. I know. This locking heaven formation was specially used to suppress Joyo Tower. After it was activated, he knew everything that happened in Joyo Tower. But unfortunately, he could only see the bottom 5 levels. So, he still couldn't find Chu Luiyue's traces. I tried to stop him just now, but I couldn't. Sun Zhongyan looked at the black karmic fire that was burning wildly below and said solemnly. Elder Wei Yun was shocked. How could this be? Sun Zhongyan held the silver pestle and controlled the entire locking heaven formation. If he really tried to stop him, how could Rongxiu still enter? How could Sun Zhongyan not know what he was thinking? In fact, he was also very shocked and confused. When he sensed Rongxiu's aura, he knew that something was wrong and immediately sent out a force to stop him. But it didn't seem to have any effect on Rongxiu. Suddenly, Sun Zhongyan was shocked. Rongxiu has already entered the first level. Elder Wei Yun's mouth was wide open. He was so shocked that he stuttered. Why? Why isn't the door closed? How did he go in? He saw with his own eyes that Joyo Tower's door closed by itself. At that time, even he was excluded. Rongxiu did not have the slightest bit of cultivation, so how did he open the door? Moreover, the entire first floor was burning. I don't know, but he did go in. And it's still going up. Sun Zhongyan looked at the flickering dots of light on the profound formation in front of him, and his heart also tightened. Now, they couldn't afford to lose the 2 people in Joyo Tower. Moreover, even if it was out of selfishness, he absolutely did not wish to see anything happen to the 2 of them. Rongxiu probably has a protective yuan instrument on him. That's why he was able to enter safely, but that shouldn't last for too long. Elder Wei Yun thought for a while and felt that this was the only plausible explanation. But no matter what, we still have to find a way to bring them out. Sun Zhongyan suddenly sucked in a cold breath. When Elder Wei Yun saw the change in his expression, his heart sank. He actually went up to the second level. Sun Zhongyan said in shock. How is this possible? His body is weak, and he can't cultivate. It's already a coincidence that he could enter the first level. How can he go up to the second level? He's not a stage 2 warrior. Lu Yu is a stage 2 warrior, but there's no trace of him on the second level. Sun Zhongyan gritted his teeth and said. Elder Wei Yun was instantly speechless. After a while, he asked hesitantly, so you're saying that he's indeed above the 5th level? Sun Zhongyan closed his eyes. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed it. Jiuyo Tower had a strict hierarchy, and every level was blocked by a barrier. No one had ever been able to go up. But now, the truth was right in front of his eyes, and he had no choice but to believe it. Boom! Just as the two of them were talking, the flames below Jiuyo Tower burned even more vigorously. Sun Zhongyan mobilized all the force in his body and poured it into the silver pestle. The gigantic profound formation in the sky became even more vibrant. It was oppressive. The two forces entered a frenzied confrontation. The commotion caused by Jiuyo Tower quickly attracted the attention of many powerful figures in the Imperial city. Mu Qinghe, who was resting in her room, suddenly opened her eyes and looked in the direction of Jiuyo Tower. He stared at it for a while and muttered softly, "Looks like a beast is about to emerge. Looks like a ferocious beast is about to be born. I didn't think there would be such an existence here." Country Yaochen really had a lot of secrets. At that moment, Hongyao suddenly flew over. Its ruby-like eyes stared intently at Jiuyo Tower. Mu Qinghe looked down at it. Hongyao had been unhappy since it came back yesterday. It refused to say anything when she asked it. It only stubbornly buried its head under its wings and remained motionless. Mu Qinghe knew that it was throwing a tantrum, but she didn't intend to coax it. Hongyao's temper was getting worse. In the past, it would complain to that person every time, and he had no choice but to give in several times. But it was different now. That person was long gone. If Hongyao continued acting like this, it would cause big trouble sooner or later. Therefore, Mu Qinghe had already made up her mind to treat Hongyao's temper. Since Hongyao didn't move, he didn't do anything and allowed it to sulk by itself. Seeing that Hongyao was on high alert and its eyes were burning with anger, he suddenly understood and frowned. "Where did you go previously?" Hongyao ignored him. It flapped its wings and was about to fly away. Mu Qinghe crossed her arms and said lightly, "Your cultivation seems to be deteriorating. It seems that your cultivation is indeed declining with each passing day. Now, even a suppressed ferocious beast is able to injure you." Hongyao turned its head angrily and glared at him. He didn't know what was going on and was just spouting nonsense. That beast was indeed suppressed under Jiuyo Tower, but it didn't mean that it was weak. Furthermore, it wasn't prepared at all and was injured by that beast. If it was serious, it would definitely be able to beat that beast to a pulp. Mu Qinghe narrowed her eyes when she saw Hongyao's reaction. Hongyao had always been proud and arrogant. It wouldn't even take a second look at ordinary fiends. For it to have such a huge reaction, it was enough to prove that the suppressed ferocious beast's level wasn't low. He had a thought, and his figure disappeared from the spot instantly. Hongyao widened its eyes. Again. He didn't want it to go, but wasn't he going now? Green flames burned on Hongyao's body, and it quickly rushed toward Jiuyo Tower. I must take this opportunity to take revenge. On the other side, Fu Yunshan, Qing Han, and the rest also felt that something was amiss. When they realized that the commotion was coming from Tianlu Academy, they were all shocked and rushed over. They weren't worried that the people of Tianlu Academy would encounter any danger, but they were shocked by the terrifying commotion. When they reached the outside of the academy, they saw Joyo Tower burning crazily from afar. The black flames had already surrounded the lower levels of Joyo Tower, making it look like purgatory. Above Joyo Tower, Sun Zhongyan and the rest were working together to suppress it. However, that huge Xian formation was on the verge of collapsing. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 293. Roar. A roar was heard again. Dark clouds gathered in the sky. Thunder rumbled. The appearance of rare treasures or high-level magical beasts would trigger a phenomenon in the heavens and earth. There's a fiend trapped under Joyo Tower? Fu Yunshan exclaimed in shock. Cheng Han's face darkened. Rumor has it that there's a pit of heavenly origins under Joyo Tower. If there's a fiend hidden there, it's most likely a ferocious beast. However, he had never heard of such a thing before. That ferocious beast seems extraordinary. Not only did it cause such a huge commotion, but it also seems like it's going to break free from Joyo Tower. Sun Zhongyan's Xian formation won't last long. Cheng Han muttered to himself, and many emotions flashed across his eyes. Fu Yunshan hurriedly said. Then, we have to hurry and help. If that ferocious beast comes out, I'm afraid. What are you afraid of? Cheng Han suddenly interrupted him and raised his brows with a strange expression. This is Joyo Tower. Even if something really happens, it's Tianlu Academy's business. Is it up to outsiders like us to interfere? That Xian formation is obviously Joyo Tower's seal, which means that they already knew that there was a ferocious beast hiding under Joyo Tower and made ample preparations. What's the point of us doing anything now? We might even get into trouble in the end. Fu Yunshan glanced at him. You mean, I don't mean anything. Brother Yunshan, if you want to help, just go ahead. I don't want to get involved in this mess. With that, Cheng Han took a step back. Brother Yunshan, please. Fu Yunshan was instantly embarrassed. Actually, he had just said it casually, but after seeing Cheng Han's attitude, he could not help but feel a little nervous. Nobody knew what was down there, and it was indeed very dangerous to go there now. He did not intend to sacrifice his life for Tianlu Academy. Cheng Han's words were not without reason. In the end, this was Tianlu Academy's business, and it had nothing to do with them. It was better to observe the situation first. Then, let's take a look first. That Xian formation has already been set up. If we go there rashly, I'm afraid we'll bring trouble to them. Fu Yunshan coughed and decided to watch from the sidelines. Cheng Han sneered in his heart. Just now, he had heard people from Tianlu Academy discussing that Chu Luiyue was still trapped in Joyo Tower. This was a heaven-sent opportunity. If they could take advantage of this opportunity to get rid of Chu Luiyue, it would save them a lot of effort. He looked at the black karmic fire that was still spreading, and an undetectable cold smile flashed across his eyes. It was such a pity that such a genius was going to fall just like that. Sun Zhongyan and the rest quickly realized that even though they had successfully activated the locking heaven formation, they were not strong enough to suppress Joyo Tower. Not only did the flames not have the slightest intention of extinguishing, they became even more rampant. As the two forces clashed, the heaven sealing array gradually fell into a disadvantageous position. If this continued, the heaven sealing array would break sooner or later. At that time, the situation would be completely out of control. It was at this moment that Sun Zhongyan sensed another wave of fluctuation coming from the profound formation. Rong Xiao had actually reached the third floor. He opened his mouth, but he was so shocked that he didn't know what to say. He didn't know what was going on with Rongxiu, such as whether he was injured or not, but he was sure that Rongxiu had passed through the barriers of the second and third floors consecutively. How exactly did he do it? Elder Wei Yun saw that Sun Zhongyan's expression wasn't right, and he vaguely guessed something in his heart. Rongxiu is still going up. Sun Zhongyan nodded with difficulty. With Chu Luyue in front of him, the things that Rongxiu had done didn't seem so shocking anymore. However, why did Rongxiu go in? This was what Elder Wei Yun couldn't figure out the most. It was impossible that he didn't know how dangerous it was inside. Suddenly, a thought flashed across his mind. Could it be? It can't be for Chu Luyue, right? When Sun Zhongyan heard this, he couldn't help but sigh. Otherwise, what else could it be? I didn't even notice it before. Previously, he thought that the two of them only knew each other, but it seemed like it wasn't just that. Ka-cha! A crisp shattering sound was suddenly heard. Sun Zhongyan looked over, and his pupils suddenly constricted. He saw that a crack had suddenly appeared in the middle of Jiuyou Tower. Jiuyou Tower had actually cracked. A cluster of black karmic fire crazily surged out from within. As a result, half of Jiuyou Tower was engulfed in flames. Sun Zhongyan's face was a little pale. Jiuyou Tower had existed for thousands of years and had weathered countless storms, but it had never been damaged in the slightest. But now, roar! Suddenly, accompanied by a ferocious roar, a cluster of black flames rose abruptly. That flame rapidly transformed into a huge eagle in mid-air and rushed towards the locking heaven formation above Jiuyou Tower. It's the illusion of that ferocious beast. Elder Wei Yun exclaimed in shock. The appearance of that eagle was exactly the same as the carving on the door of Jiuyou Tower. He had guarded Jiuyou Tower for many years and was very familiar with everything in Jiuyou Tower. Thus, he immediately recognized that eagle the moment he saw it. He never expected that such a ferocious beast was actually hiding under Jiuyou Tower. Boom! Its speed was extremely fast, and everyone could only see a black trace streaking past. The next moment, it had already collided with the Xian formation. Seal! Sun Zhongyan shouted fiercely. The force in his body surged out. The other elders and teachers were also stunned by this scene. When they heard Sun Zhongyan's voice, they finally reacted and increased their force once again. Bam! A huge collision sound was heard. Countless sparks and light scattered in all directions. The silver pestle in the middle seemed to be affected as well, and it shook violently. With this movement, the Xian formation in the sky also started to fluctuate. It looked as if it would break apart at any time. Elder Sun. This side can't hold on any longer. A teacher shouted loudly. Just as he finished speaking, the starlight under his feet suddenly exploded. The terrifying impact backfired, and he couldn't dodge at all. He spat out blood, and his body flew backward. The spot where he was previously at quickly dimmed. The illusion formed by the black karmic fire seemed to have found this weak spot. It immediately changed its direction and charged in that direction. Quick, stop it! Sun Zhongyan shouted hurriedly. However, it was already too late. This locking heaven formation was extremely huge. All the Xian masters in the academy were here, and they barely managed to activate this Xian formation together. Everyone could only be responsible for a part of it. Now that one person suddenly made a mistake, the others simply couldn't fill in time. In the blink of an eye, that black illusion had already rushed to the dim gap. Its body was wrapped in a terrifying aura, and it was extremely valiant. This time, it could probably completely destroy the locking heaven formation. Digression: I'm going out for lunch in the afternoon, and I'll probably have to wait until nighttime for the remaining 2 updates. Chapter 294. Condense. A low and powerful voice suddenly sounded. At the same time, everyone saw a silver ray of light falling. It covered the broken Xian formation. The moment the two forces came into contact, they immediately merged. The area that was originally dark instantly brightened up. The Xian formation that was previously on the verge of collapsing instantly stabilized with the infusion of this energy. Everyone looked over and saw a gray figure slowly walking over from the void. When Sun Zhongyan saw that person, he immediately exclaimed in surprise. Uncle Master. Who else could it be if not Tianlu Academy's director, Yi Zhiding? He was still wearing the gray cotton shirt and holding a fan in his hand. There were no waves of force on him, and he looked very simple. He was no different from an ordinary elder. However, everyone present knew that he was the most powerful person here. When the teachers and students in the academy saw Yi Zhiding, they all heaved a sigh of relief. Qing Han and Fu Yunshan, who were secretly observing from afar, were shocked. They didn't expect Yi Zhiding to suddenly appear at this time. He came out just in time. Qing Han glared at that figure and gritted his teeth. Fu Yunshan could not help but whisper. After so many years, old Yi seems to have become even stronger. Qing Han felt increasingly frustrated. Of course, he could see this too. He originally thought that he could win against Yi Zhiding once in the Imperial city and redeem himself. He felt rather regretful that Yi Zhiding didn't appear. After knowing that Yi Zhiding had a disciple, he thought that it wouldn't be a bad idea to let Situ Xingchen win against his disciple. However, he didn't expect Yi Zhiding's disciple to be Chu Luiyue. Also, Chu Luiyue took first place in both the warrior and Xian master competitions. What frustrated him the most was that even Situ Xingchen's first place in celestial physician was actually obtained by Chu Luiyue. Later, he regretted it immensely and actually agreed to Chu Luiyue's suggestion to replace Situ Xingchen. He originally had a stomach full of anger, but he didn't expect Joyo Tower to change just as he was about to leave the Imperial city. Yi Zhiding also came out. Most importantly, Yi Zhiding's cultivation level was obviously higher than before. Qing Han was certain that if the two of them fought now, he still wouldn't be Yi Zhiding's match. Joyo Tower is in big trouble this time. I don't think they can resolve it so easily. Qing Han said gloomily. Fu Yunshan was very hesitant. On the one hand, he didn't want to get involved in such a dangerous matter. Who knew what kind of existence was suppressed under Joyo Tower? On the other hand, he didn't want to offend Yi Zhiding because of this. Just as he was feeling conflicted, Yi Zhiding had already walked slowly to the shattered starlight. He waved the palm leaf fan in his hand, and a layer of starlight fell down. It drew a bright streak of light in the air, and finally landed on the silver pestle in the middle of the heaven ceiling formation. The silver pestle, which had been swaying a little, began to spin rapidly again. Moreover, it once again unleashed a powerful force that spread out in all directions. The huge heaven ceiling formation once again shone brightly. The black figure seemed to sense a threat as it stopped and stared at Yi Zhiding warily. It was very clear that Yi Zhiding's arrival would be a great threat to it. Both parties were in a stalemate. Yi Zhiding looked at it. His eyes, which had always been old and turbid, were now extremely bright and filled with suppression. Evil creature! How dare you! His voice boomed like thunder. Light intersected above the heaven ceiling formation. A hint of struggle flashed across the black figure's scarlet eyes. As the dean of Tianlu Academy, Yi Zhiding was also the true owner of the silver pestle. Now that he was here, the heaven ceiling formation's power was naturally more than twice as strong as before. Go! Yi Zhiding waved the palm leaf fan in his hand again. The huge heaven ceiling formation undulated like waves on the sea. Roar! The black figure let out a painful roar. Then, its entire body was actually split apart. It transformed into countless black sparks that scattered in all directions. Even the black karmic fire that was burning below seemed to be affected as it retreated a lot and didn't continue moving upwards. When Sun Zhongyan and the rest saw this, their hearts finally settled down. "Uncle Master, you're finally out of seclusion," Sun Zhongyan said agitatedly. If he was any later, the heaven ceiling formation would have really been broken by that evil creature. Yi Zhiding laughed out loud. "If I still didn't come out, the entire academy would have been destroyed by this evil creature." Sun Zhongyan lowered his head in guilt. "It's all because we're useless, you're not to blame for this. This evil creature wanted to come out long ago, but it didn't find a suitable opportunity. I happened to be at the juncture of a breakthrough, so I didn't pay much attention to it. A moment of carelessness led to today's situation." Yi Zhiding shook his head, but he didn't blame Sun Zhongyan and the rest. Sun Zhongyan asked hesitantly. "Then, Uncle Master, what do you think we should do now? That evil creature clearly hasn't been completely subdued. Also, Uncle Master, there's already a crack on Joyo Tower. I'm afraid we can't continue suppressing this evil creature in the future. This is even more troublesome." Yi Zhiding glanced at Joyo Tower. Indeed, there was a clear crack on the tower. His expression instantly turned serious. "In this case, things are much more troublesome than I expected." His gaze landed on the heaven ceiling formation again, wanting to find a way to solve this problem. Suddenly, his gaze focused. "There's still someone in Joyo Tower?" Sun Zhongyan's heart skipped a beat, and he wiped the sweat off his forehead. Yes, who's the one on the 4th floor? Seventh Prince, Prince Li." Sun Zhongyan didn't dare to hide anything and immediately answered. Yi Zhiding furrowed his brows tightly. "How did he go in?" Without waiting for Sun Zhongyan's reply, Yi Zhiding discovered something even more shocking. "There's still someone on the 5th floor." Sun Zhongyan couldn't be bothered anymore and hurriedly nodded. "Yes. Lu Yu is still on the 5th floor. Can you see which floor she's on? Uncle Master is stronger than me, so he can see the situation on the higher floors." Upon hearing the familiar name, the corners of Yi Zhiding's eyes twitched. "Who did you say?" Sun Zhongyan choked and lowered his voice. "Chu Luyue." Yi Zhiding's vision turned black. "I only have one precious disciple. Such a thing actually happened. How dangerous is Joyo Tower now? Won't she be dead if she goes in? How did she go up?" Sun Zhongyan was on the brink of tears. "I really want to know too." Yi Zhiding was anxious. He hurriedly focused and looked at the heaven ceiling formation again, wanting to check on Chu Liuyue's current situation. When he saw it, his expression turned ugly. "I can only sense that she's on the upper floors, but I can't sense which floor she's on. Now, I only know that she's not on the 6th floor. That means she's at least on the 7th floor. How can she go to such a hellish place?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 295. Sun Zhongyan was so shocked by this that he couldn't react for a while. This means that Rongxiu is already on the 4th level, and Chu Luyue is most likely on the 7th level. Uncle Master, what should we do now? Even though Sun Zhongyan had been through a lot, he still panicked in this situation. Yi Zhiding furrowed his brows and was extremely anxious. He kept waving the fan in his hand up and down. "This bastard is determined to come out. If we can't completely deal with it, I'm afraid no one will be able to enter Joyo Tower." Not to mention, he wasn't completely confident that he could completely suppress Joyo Tower when it was broken. Even if he could, how much time would it take? Could Chu Luyue and Rongxiu, who were inside, safely wait until then? Now that the black karmic fire had been released, half of the tower was probably filled with this fire. The two of them were probably in an extremely dangerous situation. Yijing suddenly rushed toward Joyo Tower. However, at this moment, a ball of black karmic fire rose again. Waves of heat surged and blocked Yijing outside. Crack! Another crack appeared on Joyo Tower. More and more flames surged out. The air around Joyo Tower became extremely hot, and even the trees at the side were burning. Yijing stared at Joyo Tower, and his heart gradually sank. Everyone, listen to my orders. Activate the locking heaven formation. Suppress this bastard. An old and deep voice spread far and wide, echoing in the sky above Tianlu Academy. Yes. All the elders and teachers answered in unison. While the outside world was in chaos, there was an eerie silence in Joyo Tower. 7th level, unlike the 6th level, the 7th level was empty. It was a complete and huge space. At this moment, Chu Luiyue was standing in this huge space and looking at the scene in front of her. She was shocked and couldn't calm down for a long time. In front of her was a huge, transparent, three-legged cauldron. It was unknown what material this cauldron was made of. It was neither stone nor jade, and it was colorless. There were strange patterns carved on the outside. Perhaps because it was too old, the pattern on it had become somewhat blurry. Chu Luiyue looked at it for a long time, but he couldn't recognize the pattern on it. However, this was nothing. What was more important was that there was a ball of black karmic fire burning wildly within the cauldron. The entire space became incomparably hot because of the existence of this flame. And the flames inside were crazily rushing out. If Chu Luiyue could go out now, he would know that the black karmic fire that was crazily spreading under Joyo Tower came from this cauldron. However, she was certain that this flame was exactly the same as the one engraved on the door of Joyo Tower. When she first entered Joyo Tower, she was burned by the illusory flames and almost lost her life. From the looks of it, it was this thing. A ferocious and ruthless aura continuously gushed out from the transparent medicinal cauldron. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. Previously, when Dumpling swallowed the 7th level's barrier, she followed Dumpling up to the 7th level. When she came up, she saw everything in front of her. She never thought that there would be such a strange flame hidden on the 7th level of Joyo Tower. According to her understanding of Joyo Tower, this thing had probably existed here since the beginning. It was really strange. The Cave of Heavenly Origins was a rare sacred place for cultivation. No one would trap a fiend here, much less leave behind such a strange flame. This thing was sinister and cold. Even though there was still a distance between them, Chu Luiyue felt a chill in her heart. It was hard to imagine who had set up so many things in Joyo Tower back then. Suddenly, 2 balls of red light appeared in the flame. In the next moment, Chu Luiyue suddenly realized that it wasn't red light but a pair of scarlet eyes. She had seen this pair of eyes before. They were the eyes of that eagle. She had felt the threat of this pair of eyes countless times, so she could recognize it at once. However, compared to before, seeing it with her own eyes this time brought her even greater shock. That bone-chilling and terrifying aura enveloped her, making it almost impossible for her to escape. Chu Luiyue's blood seemed to have frozen. Only her heart was beating wildly. She walked forward almost uncontrollably. At this moment, Dumpling, who was squatting on her shoulder, suddenly jumped up. Furthermore, it let out a threatening cry of warning. Chu Luiyue was shocked. Only then did she come back to her senses and stop in her tracks. Immediately after, she broke out in a cold sweat. She was actually bewitched by that pair of eyes just now. Once she got close, it would be dangerous. She frowned as she looked at the crazily burning flame and asked word by word, "Who are you? Who are you, and why do you keep targeting me?" What answered her was a hissing sound. The other party clearly didn't intend to answer her question. Chu Luiyue looked at Dumpling. Dumpling, can you tell what fiend it is? Dumpling sized it up and shook its head. Chu Luiyue's mind raced. She had seen many high-level fiends in her previous life, but the eagle-type ones didn't seem to be similar to this one. For a moment, she couldn't be sure of the other party's true identity. But she could be sure of one thing: this beast really wanted to get out of here. She didn't know if this transparent medicine cauldron was used to seal it or to rear it. Chu Luiyue didn't dare to act recklessly. Just as she was deep in thought, a trace of biting cold murderous intent flashed in that pair of scarlet eyes. The next moment, a ball of black karmic fire transformed into a pair of huge wings and flew towards her. Fierce eyes and sharp beak. In the blink of an eye, it rushed in front of Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue was shocked and wanted to retreat immediately. However, that terrifying aura almost made her unable to move. Just in this moment of hesitation, her body was already enveloped by that pair of wings. Dumpling's hair stood on end and wanted to rush up immediately. At this moment, the water droplet that was quietly suspended in Chu Luiyue's dantian suddenly spun rapidly. Digression, phew. Time for dinner. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 296. A vast oppressive aura suddenly descended. A powerful devouring force was emitted from the water droplet. The phantom that was about to reach Chu Luiyue seemed to have sensed danger. A trace of panic flashed across its eyes, and it quickly retreated. A red flame surged out from Chu Luiyue's body. It chased after the phantom crazily. Chi! In the blink of an eye, the two flames, one black and one red, collided. A piercing sound was heard. The black phantom seemed to have encountered something terrifying. It quickly retreated and returned to the transparent medicine cauldron. However, the red flame still chased after the edge of the medicine cauldron. It burned fiercely. A grayish-white smoke was emitted. Roar! The black karmic fire in the transparent medicine cauldron suddenly went out of control, as if it had been greatly agitated. And that mournful cry came from within. Chu Luiyue looked at the scene in shock. The red flame came out on its own. She did not have time to think about anything just now. The water droplet in her dantian was the first to exert force. It chased the black phantom back. To be precise, the black karmic fire was fleeing in a sorry state. Chu Luiyue could feel the deep fear in the beast's heart even through the transparent medicine cauldron. Is this the soul of some kind of demonic beast? Chu Luiyue muttered softly. She saw clearly that when the black karmic fire rose, there was no demonic beast's physical body inside. However, what kind of demonic beast could survive for 1,000 years with only a soul? The doubts in Chu Luiyue's heart grew. She stared at the scene in front of her and frowned. At this moment, the red flame had transformed into a huge fence, completely surrounding the transparent medicine cauldron. That mournful cry gradually became weaker. Dumpling swung its tail at the side, as if it was regretful that it could not deal with the beast personally. Chu Luiyue stood in the same spot for a long time with a subtle expression. In fact, although the crimson flame had appeared very suddenly, she had sensed it. For example, she seemed to have sensed the beast's fear and retreat. It seemed like it wanted to surrender. Chu Luiyue carefully sensed it and found that he seemed to be able to control the red flame. With a wave of her hand, the flame flew back into her palm. The originally arrogant black karmic fire had already wilted. In comparison, it was obviously not a match for Chu Luiyue's flames. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but look down. On his palm, there was only a small cluster of dancing red flames. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, no one would have thought that the flames actually contained such a powerful force. This scarlet flame was clearly from the water droplet. Its color was very similar to the red words that had appeared on the water droplet. Chu Luihua suppressed all the thoughts that flashed through his mind and looked ahead. Admit defeat or continue. 5th floor of Joyo Tower. The black karmic fire was quickly spreading upwards from below. From the inside to the outside, it was filled with blazing flames. At a glance, it was like purgatory. However, in this sea of fire, there was a person walking up slowly. He was dressed in white, and his figure was tall and slender. Every step he took was casual and calm. In the endless darkness, he was the only white. With every step he took, the flames in front of him would automatically part and open up a path. He walked alone, and the two simple yet extreme colors reflected each other like an eternal painting. Soon, he reached the barrier of the 6th floor. He stood at the top of the stairs, and his deep gaze swept across the barrier. Then, he reached out his palm and slowly placed it on the barrier. He seemed to be able to feel a trace of residual heat. That was her aura. Rong Xiao sighed softly. I thought that she would at most reach the 6th floor, but I didn't expect that. He curled his fingers slightly, and the barrier spread silently. He continued to walk up. Rong Xiao has already reached the 6th floor. Yi Zhiding, who had been paying attention to the situation in Joyo Tower, suddenly exclaimed. Sun Zhongyan's eyelids twitched harshly. One Chu Luihua isn't enough. Why is Rong Xiao also? How did the two of them do it? He pondered for a while and finally said, Uncle Master, actually, this might not be a bad thing. The bottom 5 floors of Joyo Tower are already surrounded by the black karmic fire. If we can escape to the top, we might be able to avoid it. Zhongyan, I remember that you've been to the 5th floor before, right? Sun Zhongyan nodded in confusion. Yi Zhiding sighed softly. Then, do you think the fire below is more dangerous, or the floors above? Sun Zhongyan was speechless. He clearly remembered that the pressure would increase with every level he ascended. Whether it was Chu Luihua or Rong Xiao, they didn't seem to have enough ability to support it. Director. The fire seems to be a little smaller. Not far away, Baichen suddenly shouted. The others hurriedly looked over and indeed realized that the fire that had reached the 5th floor didn't continue to go up. Also, compared to before, it did seem to be a little weaker. Yi Zhiding stared at it for a while, but his expression didn't relax at all. Instead, his brows furrowed even more tightly. Sun Zhongyan was about to say, "That's great," when he turned and saw Yi Zhiding's expression. His smile suddenly froze. "Uncle Master, what's wrong?" "Something's wrong," Yi Zhiding muttered softly. Sun Zhongyan took another look and asked in confusion, "Something's wrong. Something's wrong. What's wrong? Isn't that ferocious beast suppressed by our locking heaven formation? I think the fire seems to be a lot smaller. This should be a sign that they're going to win." Yi Zhiding didn't say anything and only shook his head slowly. Something's wrong indeed. The locking heaven formation didn't suddenly increase its power, and the ferocious beast's transformation was too sudden. Could it be that something happened in Joyo Tower? For some reason, he felt a little uneasy as if something was about to happen. Screech! At this moment, a crisp chirp sounded from afar. Everyone looked up and saw a palm-sized green sparrow flying rapidly toward Joyo Tower. It was extremely fast, and green flames were burning on its body. From afar, it looked like a green fireball. "That's a 7th grade fiend, a green sparrow." Yi Zhiding was shocked. Sun Zhongyan hurriedly explained. "Uncle Master, that's the fiend of the Tianling dynasty's era, Mu Qinghe." Yi Zhiding had been in seclusion previously, so he didn't know what was happening in the outside world. However, he heard the words Tianling dynasty very clearly. He was shocked. When he looked carefully, he indeed saw a young man following behind the green sparrow. He was dressed in ordinary clothes and had a handsome face. However, the scar on his left eye made him look even more stern and oppressive. What surprised Yijing the most was that he couldn't see through the other party's cultivation level. Hong Yao was furious when it saw the burning black karmic fire. It flapped its wings and flew toward Joyo Tower. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from LoveWeb. Chapter 297. Mu Qinghe frowned when she saw the burning Joyo Tower. His heart skipped a beat when he saw Hong Yao rushing inside, but he didn't stop it. In the blink of an eye, Hong Yao had already passed through the black karmic fire, and its small figure disappeared into Joyo Tower. Before Sun Zhongyan could stop it, he discovered that the azure sparrow had already disappeared before his eyes. He looked at Yijing hesitantly. Yijing was very calm. That's a 7th grade fiend. Nothing will happen to it. At the very least, there's still its master. Sun Zhongyan was then relieved. That's right. I almost forgot that Mu Qinghe is here too. He looked at Mu Qinghe and cupped his hands. Vice Admiral Mu. Why are you here? Mu Qinghe's tone was calm. After such a big commotion, the entire Imperial city knows about it. Many people had already arrived outside Tianlu Academy, let alone him. Sun Zhongyan was a little awkward. Mu Qinghe stared at the burning flames on Joyo Tower and frowned. I didn't expect such a ferocious beast to be hidden under Joyo Tower. He was still a little confused previously as he didn't know what kind of fiend could hurt Hong Yao. But now, he understood a little after seeing this scene. Sun Zhongyan did not know how to respond. After hesitating for a moment, he said worriedly, Vice Admiral Mu, this place is very dangerous now. Your fiend just ran in. It would be fine if nothing happened, but if something happened, they wouldn't be able to escape responsibility. Mu Qinghe's expression was still cold. It knows what it's doing. Although it's a little dangerous, it's definitely not fatal. It's not impossible to let Hong Yao train for a while. Since Mu Qinghe said that, Sun Zhongyan couldn't persuade her anymore. He returned to Yijing's side and activated the locking heaven formation together. Mu Qinghe's gaze slowly swept across the locking heaven formation and finally landed on the silver pestle in the middle. A look of surprise flashed across her eyes. That thing, this small Tianlu Academy seems to be much more complicated than I imagined. Hong Yao easily passed through the black karmic fire without any damage. However, it took some effort to enter the sealed Joyo Tower. The door below was locked, and the windows on the other floors were all closed. In the end, it finally found the crack in the middle of the tower and flew in against the flames that were constantly gushing out. Puff! Chu Luiyue was confronting the beast when he suddenly heard a strange sound coming from above. She looked up and saw a familiar green figure flying towards her. She widened her eyes in shock. Red Demon. Why are you here? After saying that, she suddenly realized that her tone was too familiar, so she immediately looked behind Hong Yao vigilantly. Fortunately, Mu Qinghe did not follow. Red Demon flapped its wings and flew in. At a glance, it saw the transparent medicine cauldron below as well as the black flames that were crazily burning in it. Within it, it felt a familiar threat. It was this fellow who had caused it to be injured. Red Demon widened its eyes and was about to rush up to take revenge. However, at this moment, it suddenly heard Chu Luiyue's voice. It looked up in shock and saw that Chu Luiyue was also here. It was pleasantly surprised and hurriedly turned around and flew toward Chu Luiyue. Before it could fly over, a red shadow flashed and blocked its path. It was Dumpling. Just like before, Dumpling stared at Hong Yao vigilantly, making it clear that she did not want it to get close to Chu Liyue. Hong Yao was also annoyed, and the flames on its body suddenly rose. The two little ones were in a confrontation again. Chu Liyue looked at them helplessly. He knew that when these two were together, they would always be at odds. How could they fight as soon as they met? Dumpling. Chu Liyue's tone contained a faint warning. Tuanzi was not convinced, so she snorted and refused to retreat. Hong Yao also did not give in and stared at Dumpling. Chu Liyue said, "If you want to fight, go out and fight now." The two little ones froze at the same time. Chu Liyue continued, "Dumpling, I won't help you. Hong Yao is a 7th-grade demonic beast. You may not be its opponent now." Dumpling held its head in annoyance. Hong Yao's eyes flashed with a trace of pride, and it bit its wings. "And Hong Yao." Chu Liyue looked at it again. "If you kill my demonic beast, you know the consequences." Hong Yao was stunned. Dumpling was very proud. She turned around and shook her butt at Hong Yao arrogantly. Hong Yao was so angry that it turned around a few times. Finally, it stopped and looked at Chu Liyue pitifully. Her ruby-like eyes were instantly filled with tears, turning even redder. It was so angry that it cried. Chu Liyue's heart suddenly softened. In fact, she knew that Hong Yao just wanted to come to her side. After all, she used to help Mu Qinghe raise it for so long, and every time it was angry with Mu Qinghe, she always helped it vent its anger. Hong Yao had always been very dependent on her. It was even closer to her than its real master, Mu Qinghe. As a reincarnated human, Hong Yao could recognize her. How could she not be moved? She didn't know how Hong Yao had lived for more than a year. Finally, she sighed softly and waved her hand. "Hong Yao." Dumpling suddenly froze and looked up at Chu Liyue in disbelief. Chu Liyue glanced at it. Dumpling immediately became obedient. Although it was still angry, it didn't dare to really anger Chu Liyue. When Red Demon heard the summon, it flew over in surprise and joy. Seeing that it was about to jump into her arms again, Chu Liyue smiled helplessly and dotingly. However, when it arrived in front of her, Hong Yao suddenly stopped. It looked at Chu Liyue hesitantly with a timid look in its eyes. It had imagined such a scene countless times, but every time, it was like a bubble that burst. In fact, in more than a year, it had gradually accepted the fact that that person was no longer around. It was just that it was unwilling to admit it. But now, she was right in front of it. What if it was still the same as before, dissipating with a touch? Seeing Hong Yao's hesitant and timid look, Chu Liyue's heart ached and she softened her voice. "Yao Yao, come here." Hearing this, Hong Yao's body suddenly froze, but its eyes were filled with endless ecstasy. In this world, no one would call it that again. It finally stopped hesitating and jumped into Chu Liyue's arms. Chu Liyue raised her hand and gently stroked its head. Hong Yao's body trembled, and big drops of tears rolled down. Chu Liyue was very glad that she met Hong Yao here again. Otherwise, she would never dare to do this. Tuanzi looked at this scene angrily from the side. What was there to cry about? It didn't even cry. While thinking, it quickly stretched out its claws and wiped its face. Roar! At this moment, the beast in the medicine cauldron, which had already quieted down, roared again. Hong Yao turned around angrily. Then it quickly flew out. It didn't make a sound earlier or later, but chose this moment. This beast must be doing it on purpose. New hatred and old hatred, I'll take revenge together. Digression, I'll update 4 chapters in the morning, and then I'll go out. I don't know if there will be 5 chapters today. Don't wait. Mobile users, please browse and read. Chapter 298. The red demon flapped its wings, and 2 balls of blue flames burned instantly. Behind it, an enormous azure phantom suddenly appeared. The suppression of a 7th-grade fiend was unparalleled. Chu Luiyue glanced at Hong Yao in shock. She didn't expect it to use a killer move right from the start. However, on second thought, Hong Yao seemed to have been injured by this thing previously. Hong Yao had always been very vengeful. How could it let it go just like that? This time, it must find a way to get back at Hong Yao. As if sensing the threat from Hong Yao, the black karmic fire in the transparent cauldron suddenly jumped violently. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes. This ferocious beast indeed doesn't give up. It showed weakness previously only because it was at a disadvantage. Suddenly, her gaze focused. There seemed to be a stream of light on the transparent cauldron. She felt that something was amiss and took a closer look. However, she didn't see anything this time. Screech! Hong Yao let out a clear cry and flapped its wings. The 2 green flames were flapped out harshly. They went straight for the transparent cauldron. Crack! Another crack appeared on Jiuyou Tower. Even more black flames gushed out from within. Seeing this scene, everyone was extremely nervous and speechless. Yi Zhiding injected force into the silver pestle again. The suppression above the locking heaven formation increased again. However, the power in Jiuyou Tower seemed to have suddenly become violent. What's going on? Didn't the black flames stop for a while just now? Sun Zhongyan was shocked. Yi Zhiding's expression was solemn. As expected. He felt that something was amiss just now, and it seemed like it was indeed so. The black karmic fire wasn't suppressed by the locking heaven formation but by the ferocious beast. Although he didn't know where its power came from, he was certain that if the ferocious beast continued to become stronger, the locking heaven formation would eventually break. Bam! A rock suddenly peeled off Jiuyou Tower. Yi Zhiding's heart suddenly sank. Jiuyou Tower is probably going to collapse. On the other side, Mu Qinghe's gaze focused. She actually saw a familiar green flame in the black karmic fire. Is Hong Yao fighting with that ferocious beast? It seems like the battle is intense. However, the situation of the red demon seemed a bit strange. Although it was proud and stubborn, it was also lazy. That ferocious beast had injured it before, so it would definitely take this opportunity to take revenge. But it seemed that there was no need to use such a killer move right from the start. After Red Demon went in, it seemed to be very excited. He thought for a moment, then suddenly asked Sun Zhongyan, "Is there anyone else in Jiuyou Tower?" Sun Zhongyan was very surprised. How did Vice Admiral Mu know? He had just arrived, so he shouldn't have had the time to hear the discussions of the people below, right? Mu Qinghe already had a vague guess in her heart. Chu Luiyue. Sun Zhongyan was stunned. Seeing his reaction, Mu Qinghe knew that she was right. Chu Luiyue was indeed in Jiuyou Tower. He looked at Jiuyou Tower again with a deep gaze. This Chu Luiyue really has a lot of mysteries. Is Vice Admiral Mu worried about Lu Yu? Sun Zhongyan asked tentatively. After all, Chu Luiyue had the Daijing Yuan Meridian, and he was the only person who had the chance to go to the Tianling dynasty with Mu Qinghe. It was normal for Mu Qinghe to be worried. Hearing this, Mu Qinghe didn't comment. Sun Zhongyan wiped the sweat off his forehead. Vice Admiral Mu, don't worry. Lu Yu is a student of our school and also Uncle Master's disciple. We will save her no matter what. Mu Qinghe lifted her chin slightly, and her eyes were filled with scrutiny. Just by relying on this half-activated locking heaven formation. Sun Zhongyan was speechless. Mu Qinghe was right. This locking heaven formation seemed to be fully activated, but only half of its power was released. This was because Yi Zhiding was around, and it was already better than before. But in reality, the real locking heaven formation was dozens of times more complicated than what was shown now. However, as their cultivation levels were limited, they could only perform to this standard with so many people working together. That complicated Xian formation pattern made him feel dizzy just by looking at it for a while, let alone activating it. If he couldn't do it, the other Xian masters in the school naturally couldn't do it either. As a result, he fell into this awkward situation. His Majesty has arrived. Her Majesty has arrived. Suddenly, an anxious voice was heard from afar. Everyone was shocked. Why is Emperor Zhaowen here at this time? The Empress is here too. Zuo Rong and the rest turned around and saw Emperor Zhaowen rushing over as expected. The Empress followed closely behind. Chu Ning led a group of Imperial guards over with the two of them. Your Majesty. Zuo Rong and the rest hurriedly went forward and were about to bow when Emperor Zhaowen stopped them. Where's seventh brother? This seventh brother naturally referred to the current seventh prince, Princely, Rongxiu. Nobody expected his first sentence to be about Rongxiu, and they couldn't help but be dazed. Cold resentment flashed across the Empress's eyes, but it was fleeting, and nobody noticed it. After hearing that something happened at Joyo Tower, Emperor Zhaowen immediately rushed over from the palace. She rarely saw Emperor Zhaowen so nervous, so she didn't need to think to know who he was worried about. Isn't it all because Rongxiu is in Tianlu Academy? I originally thought that His Majesty bestowed the title of princely to Rongxiu, and it's already a great honor. I didn't expect him to favor Rongxiu to this extent. After not having him by his side for so many years, His Majesty still dotes on Rongxiu the most. Isn't all of this because of that woman? She's clearly been dead for so many years, but her soul still lingers around. How disgusting. The Empress's fingernails dug deep into her palms, but her expression didn't change as she gently advised from the side. Your Majesty, don't worry. Prince Li is blessed, and he'll be fine. Didn't you say that all the students in the academy have left? Look, they're all over there. Prince Li will definitely be fine. Emperor Zhaowen hurriedly looked up and indeed saw all the students gathered together. Joyo Tower was burning in the distance, but it was still quite a distance away. Besides, the academy's elders and teachers were around, so there shouldn't be any problems. However, Emperor Zhaowen scanned the surroundings and didn't see Rongxiu. He couldn't help but frown. Why isn't old Seven here? Zuo Rong was the first to react. When he heard Emperor Zhaowen's question, he didn't know what to say. Your Majesty, Prince Li, looking at his hesitant appearance, Emperor Zhaowen instantly had an ominous feeling. Where exactly is he? Zuo Rong looked down. Your Majesty, Prince Li is in Joyo Tower now. What? Emperor Zhaowen felt as if he was struck by lightning, and his body suddenly shook. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from IUN. Chapter 299. The Empress hurriedly held on to Emperor Zhaowen and worriedly said, Don't worry. Your Majesty, you must take care of your health. Emperor Zhaowen held the Empress's wrist tightly and finally stabilized himself. He anxiously looked at Joyo Tower as he was worried and angry. How could this be? Aren't all the other students here? Why is he in Joyo Tower? Zuo Rong and the others looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Boom! At that moment, the flames on Joyo Tower exploded again. It continued to spread upwards. Emperor Zhaowen's heart twitched when he saw this, and he finally couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. His health isn't good to begin with, and you actually allowed him to enter Joyo Tower. What kind of intentions are you harboring? If anything happens to him, we will definitely not let you off easily. Emperor Jiawen had always respected Tianlu Academy's elders and teachers, so he had never spoken to them in such a tone. Therefore, when His Majesty shouted, everyone was taken aback. Only then did they realize that His Majesty was very worried about Princely, Zhuo Rong explained helplessly. Your Majesty, please calm down. Actually, His Highness Princely went in himself. Emperor Jiawen was dazed, and his face was filled with suspicion. How is that possible? Rong Xiu clearly knew that he was sick. How could he be so stupid as to enter Joyo Tower? We dare not deceive your Majesty, so we can only tell you the truth. In fact, all the students had been chased out of Joyo Tower before the anomaly. After that, the black karmic fire burned in Joyo Tower, but Princely entered Joyo Tower at that time. He swallowed hard. Elder Wei Yun and the others tried to stop him, but they failed. These two simple sentences contained a huge amount of information. Emperor Jiawen took a while before he recovered his senses. You're saying that he passed through the flames. Because of the shock, his voice was trembling. Zhuo Rong and the others could only nod. Yes. In fact, how could they not be shocked? Rong Xiu's actions were tantamount to courting death. Later on, we also tried to go in, but the fire was too big. There was nothing we could do. Zhuo Rong lowered his head as he spoke. He himself knew that this explanation sounded very weak. Even though it was true. However, they had indeed failed to protect Rong Xiu. If something really happened to Rong Xiu, Emperor Jiawen looked up and dazedly stared at Joyo Tower, which was surrounded by black karmic fire. His face turned pale, and he didn't say anything for a long time. The Empress stood beside him. Her wrist hurt from his unconsciously pinching. She didn't need to look to know that it was bruised. However, she calmly endured it. What was this bit of pain? Hearing that Rong Xiu was trapped in Joyo Tower was enough to offset the pain. Could Rong Xiu survive in such a dangerous place? Originally, he was still worrying about how to get rid of this thorn in his side. Who would have thought that he would send himself to death? Zhuo Rong had made it clear that it was Rong Xiu who insisted on going in. If he died, he could not blame anyone. At the very least, it had nothing to do with her and her son. The Empress suppressed the joy in her heart and tightly knitted her brows as she comforted him. Your Majesty, don't be anxious. Princely always knows his limits, and he must have his reasons for doing this. Now that Elder Yi is here, I'm sure Princely will be safe. However, Emperor Jiawen couldn't hear a single word. Elder Yi was indeed here, but everyone could tell that the locking heaven formation couldn't last much longer. Besides, even Joyo Tower was starting to collapse. Quickly think of a way to save Rong Xiu. Emperor Jiawen muttered as he suddenly saw Mu Qinghe's figure from the corner of his eye. His eyes lit up as if he had seen the last straw. Vice Admiral Mu. Vice Admiral Mu. Upon hearing that, Mu Qinghe looked at Emperor Jiawen. He naturally knew about Emperor Jiawen's actions and knew that Emperor Jiawen wanted to ask him for help. However, he didn't intend to help. Looking at Mu Qinghe's cold and nonchalant expression, Emperor Jiawen felt very uneasy. However, at this juncture, he couldn't think of any other solution. Thus, he could only beg. Vice Admiral Mu, you're very capable. You can definitely, don't save him. Mu Qinghe straightforwardly interrupted Emperor Jiawen, leaving no room for negotiation. Emperor Jiawen's face turned even paler. Just as he was about to continue fighting, Mu Qinghe spoke again. He's not in any danger now. Why should I save him? Inside Joyo Tower. Bang! Hong Yao suffered a blow, and its body flew backward before landing harshly on the floor. The green fire on its body also became much weaker. Hong Yao. Chu Luiyue immediately went forward. Hong Yao struggled to get up, but it still collapsed in the end. On its wing, there was a bloody wound. Chu Luyue carefully carried it up and turned around to take a look. The aura of the illusion formed by the black karmic fire in the transparent cauldron was also much weaker. The two of them fought intensely and actually ended in a draw. Chu Luyue knew that Hong Yao had previously fought with the other party and was injured. Thus, she didn't dare to underestimate it at all. However, she didn't expect Hong Yao to be on par with the other party when it went all out. If this thing really escaped, she really didn't know how much trouble it would cause. At this moment, Chu Luyue saw another ray of light flash across the transparent cauldron. This time, it was much clearer than before. Chu Luyue could even tell that the ray of light seemed to follow the strange pattern on the cauldron. She didn't know if it was her imagination. She kept feeling that after the ray of light flashed, the pattern on the cauldron seemed to be clearer than before. Hong Yao lay in Chu Luyue's arms, but it still stared at the cauldron with indignance. It was already embarrassing enough to lose once previously, but it didn't expect it to lose the second time. If this spread out, its reputation would be ruined. Hong Yao moved and wanted to fight again, but it could only flap its wings weakly. Chu Luyue said, "You're injured now, so you'd better behave yourself." Hong Yao immediately folded its wings obediently. However, thinking that it was useless after this fight, it couldn't help but bury its head in anger. Chu Luyue understood. "You want me to help you take revenge?" Hong Yao poked its head out and answered aggrievedly. Dumpling glanced at it contemptuously and sneered. "It's useless." Hong Yao immediately glared at her fiercely. Chu Luyue patted its head and smiled helplessly. "Okay. Wait by the side." Hong Yao reluctantly left and flew to the side. Before leaving, it didn't forget to raise its head at the black karmic fire, looking arrogant as if it had found a backer. Chu Luyue held her forehead. Hong Yao didn't seem to realize that she was no longer who she used to be. She really wasn't sure whether she could win or not. Thinking of this, she flipped her palm. With a thought, a cluster of red flames suddenly rose. Almost at the same time. Above the transparent cauldron, endless light suddenly gushed out. The pattern on it quickly became clear. Boom. Digression, I'm going out and won't be back until very late. Therefore, there may not be 5 chapters. If there is, it will be very late. Everyone can watch it tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 300. The fire in the cauldron suddenly burned fiercely. Almost in the blink of an eye, the aura was many times stronger than before. Chu Luyue was taken aback as she took a step back from the terrifying heat wave. Then, a pair of red eyes appeared again. All the fire in the surroundings quickly gathered. Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat. Previously, when this ferocious beast took form, it only gathered a portion of the fire. It had never gathered all the fire like this. Boom! A loud sound suddenly came from above. Chu Luyue looked up and was shocked to see a ball of black karmic fire barging in from outside. It quickly merged with the illusion. Those were the flames that had surged outside previously. At this moment, for some reason, those flames actually all came back. Chu Luyue felt uneasy. As the fire kept gathering, the illusion became more and more solid. It also gradually had a huge and clear outline. Chu Luyue stared at it closely. That illusion looked exactly the same as the carving on Joyo Tower's door. It was a huge black eagle with its wings folded in front of its body. Only a pair of red eyes were filled with endless murderous intent. It made one shudder. Swoosh! Its wings suddenly spread open. A sharp screech reverberated in the entire Joyo Tower. Look! The fire on Joyo Tower is dissipating. Just as everyone was extremely nervous and worried that Joyo Tower would collapse, an exclamation was suddenly heard from the crowd. Everyone looked over in unison. Sun Zhongyan and the rest were pleasantly surprised. Uncle Master. It seems like the locking heaven formation is working. Yi Zhiding stared closely, and his expression suddenly changed. Oh no! Retreat! Everyone was confused. The next moment, Yi Zhiding suddenly flew toward the silver pestle in the middle. The fire outside Joyo Tower started surging in at an even faster speed. Yi Zhiding's hand hit the silver pestle harshly. Rich force surged in crazily. The power of the locking heaven formation increased again. At this point, everyone finally realized that the black fire wasn't extinguished. Instead, it was all surging in. Although they didn't know what was going on, anyone who saw this scene would feel that something was amiss. Bang! The cracks on Joyo Tower gradually expanded, and the outer layer started to peel off at an even faster speed. Through the broken Joyo Tower, everyone could only see an endless sea of black fire. The entire Joyo Tower seemed to have been occupied by the flames. Sun Zhongyan and the others felt their hearts clench tightly. The situation in Joyo Tower was extremely dangerous. Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue, who were still inside, were most likely dead. Emperor Zhaowen quickly walked forward, wanting to find the familiar figure in the fire. The Empress quickly pulled him back. Your Majesty! Danger! Zhuo Rong and the others immediately stepped forward to stop him. What a joke! The people inside hadn't come out yet. How could they let more people in? Emperor Zhaowen looked dejected as if he had aged by more than 10 years in an instant. Seeing him like this, the Empress was both jealous and delighted. It would be better if he was dead. Not far away, the students who had gathered together finally couldn't help but whisper to each other. It's over. Joyo Tower is really going to collapse this time. I wonder what kind of ferocious beast is being suppressed down there. It's actually so powerful. If the director and the rest can't stop it. Pfft. What are you talking about? How can the director and the rest not have a way? Joyo Tower has existed for thousands of years, and the director and the elders are very strong. They can definitely suppress it again. But if Joyo Tower collapses, there's a pit of heavenly origins below. I really don't know what will happen after today. Be content. At least we're still alive. However, Prince Li and Chu Luiyue inside are probably. At this point, Chu Ning, who had just finished instructing his subordinates, happened to hear this. He instantly looked at the few people who were speaking in shock. Yu is inside too. I came in a hurry just now and only cared about telling the Imperial guards to spread out and isolate Tianlu Academy. I didn't notice anything else at all. He immediately looked up and scanned his surroundings. As expected, he didn't see the familiar figure. He forcefully calmed himself down and made himself calm down. Then, he took out the compass in his arms. The needle on the compass spun gently and finally pointed to Joyo Tower. Chu Ning's heart was filled with worry and relief. He was worried that Yu was indeed trapped in Joyo Tower. Fortunately, since the compass still had a reaction, it proved that Yu was still fine. He put away the compass and immediately rushed toward Joyo Tower. Lord Chu Ning. What are you trying to do? Zhuo Rong saw Chu Ning's actions and hurriedly stopped him. Chu Ning stared at Joyo Tower. Yu is still inside. Rumble. Dark clouds gathered in the sky, and a sudden clap of thunder sounded. A silver lightning suddenly appeared in the rolling clouds. Soon after, the crowd saw that the lightning was rapidly descending and striking straight down. It went straight for Yi Zhiding. Yi Zhiding was forced to retreat quickly. Boom! The bolt of lightning struck the silver pestle with unparalleled precision. In the next moment, the lightning transformed into countless streaks of light that quickly spread down and covered the entire Joyo Tower. Bam! Above the heaven-sealing array, a star suddenly exploded. An elder suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. The area under his feet also quickly dimmed. Then, without waiting for everyone to react, multiple sounds came from the locking heaven formation. Bam, bam, bam. In the blink of an eye, the massive heaven-sealing formation dimmed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then, it completely collapsed. A huge black figure suddenly rushed out of Joyo Tower. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 301. The locking heaven formation cracked. A few elders and teachers suffered a huge backlash and fell down one after another. Even Enchanting took a few steps back. Joyo Tower was already enveloped by endless streams of light, dazzling everyone. However, everyone present only felt endless fear when they saw this scene. Now that the locking heaven formation cracked, they wouldn't be able to continue suppressing the ferocious beasts in Joyo Tower. Uncle Master, what do we do now? Sun Zhongyan asked anxiously. Enchanting swallowed the bloody stench in his throat. Quick! Repair the locking heaven formation. Inside Joyo Tower, Chu Luiyue clearly heard the thunder and saw the bolt of lightning harshly striking down from the top of the pagoda. Countless streams of light appeared on the walls in all directions and surged toward the transparent cauldron in the middle. Gradually, a clear image finally appeared in the middle of the transparent cauldron. Screech! Chu Luiyue was shocked. This word. Screech. At this moment, the black phantom in the transparent cauldron suddenly let out a sharp screech. The next moment, it flapped its wings and dived toward Chu Luiyue. Dumpling immediately stood in front of Chu Luiyue. A huge wing flapped past. A terrifying airwave came and sent Dumpling flying. Chu Luiyue immediately hugged Dumpling and waved her hand. A transparent barrier instantly appeared in front of them. Boom! That ball of black fire hit the crystal barrier harshly. But this time, the black karmic fire seemed to be much stronger than before. After a moment of stalemate, a crack actually appeared on the crystal barrier. The huge black eagle's eyes were filled with crazy murderous intent, and its sharp claws slapped down harshly. Crack! The colored glass barrier was completely shattered. Chu Luiyue suddenly looked up. The sharp claws were already in front of her. They were about to land and tear her into pieces. She retreated without hesitation and waved her hand at the same time. A ball of red fire suddenly surged out of her palm. Then, it condensed into a huge barrier at a visible speed. Boom! 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 The two balls of flames collided fiercely. Sparks flew everywhere. A terrifying shockwave spread out, and Chu Luiyue was sent flying. With a bang, he hit the wall. Her body trembled and she felt as if her internal organs were squeezed together. It was about to explode. At the same time, Rongxiu, who was also in Joyo Tower, had already moved from the 6th level to the 7th level. Looking at the damaged 7th barrier in front of him, Rongxiu's eyes flashed with a hint of understanding, as if he had already guessed who had done this. The surrounding black karmic fire quickly surged toward the 7th level. However, when they passed by Rongxiu, they automatically avoided him. Rongxiu lifted his foot and continued to walk up. However, right at that moment, several silver rays of light flowed over and began to repair the damaged barrier at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, the barrier was as good as new. Rong Xiu's eyes gradually turned cold, but the corners of his mouth were dyed with a cold smile. You want to stop me? No one responded. Only the black karmic fire covered the barrier. It was obvious that they didn't want Rong Xiu to go up to the 7th level. A trace of murderous intent flashed across Rong Xiu's eyes. He raised his hand slightly, and his knuckles were distinct. A terrifying aura rapidly gathered around him. However, just as his hand was about to land on the barrier, he suddenly stopped. He closed his eyes, as if he was listening to something. Then, he opened his eyes, and his brows moved slightly. His expression became somewhat playful. Since that's the case, his palm moved slightly, and a rich force quickly surged out. Then, the force quickly condensed outside the barrier, and finally formed silver light pillars that were as thick as an adult's forearm. From the outside, it looked like the door of a cage, completely sealing off the 7th level. His thin, scarlet lips curled up slightly, as if he was waiting to watch a good show. On the 7th level, Chu Luiyue slowly rubbed her shoulder. The collision just now had almost broken her shoulder blade. Fortunately, the barrier formed by the crimson flames was able to block the black karmic fire. As she watched the intense battle between the black and red flames, she thought about how to solve the current predicament. She glanced at the transparent cauldron from the corner of her eye. For some reason, she felt that the cauldron seemed to be calling out to her. That feeling was very weak at first, but now it was getting stronger. She couldn't ignore it anymore. This ferocious beast didn't have a physical body, only a soul. For it to be able to survive for 1,000 years, it must have something to do with the pit of heavenly origins under Jiuyou Tower. She didn't know who exactly suppressed this ferocious beast here, but she could guess from the carvings on the door of Jiuyou Tower that Jiuyou Tower was used to seal this ferocious beast. The black karmic fire burned continuously in the transparent cauldron. Then, there was most likely something fishy about the transparent cauldron. Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue made up her mind and directly walked toward the cauldron. Sensing Chu Luiyue's actions, the black phantom let out a sneer, as if mocking Chu Luiyue's stupidity. The cauldron was a sacred item, and it wasn't something Chu Luiyue could touch. A stage 2 warrior like her would probably die on the spot before she could even get close. The pair of scarlet eyes stared at Chu Luiyue mockingly. It was just thinking about how to devour Chu Luiyue, and it didn't expect her to send herself to its doorstep. Chu Luiyue walked in front of the cauldron and slammed her palm on the swastika pattern. Digression, Kavinka felt terrible. Let's watch it together tonight. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 302. The Empress hurriedly supported Emperor Jiawen and said with a worried expression, "Your Majesty, you must be careful of your body." Emperor Jiawen's hand tightly grasped the Empress's wrist. With great difficulty, he steadied himself and anxiously looked at the 9 Netherworld Tower. His heart was filled with worry and anger. How could this be? Aren't the other students here? Why is he in the 9 Netherworld Tower? Zhuorong and the others looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Boom! At this moment, the flames above the 9 Netherworld Tower exploded again. It continued to spread upwards. Emperor Jiawen's heart twitched when he saw this. Finally, he could not hold back the anger in his heart and shouted, "His body is not good, and you still let him enter the 9 Netherworld Tower. What are your intentions? If something happens to him, I will definitely not let you off lightly." Emperor Jiawen had always been respectful towards the elders and teachers of the Celestial Foothill Academy. He had never spoken to them with such a tone. So when this shout came out, everyone was taken aback. Only then did they realize that His Majesty was not just worried about King Li. Zhuorong helplessly explained, "Your Majesty, please calm down. This matter was actually His Highness King Li himself entered. Emperor Zhaoan was taken aback, his face full of suspicion. How is that possible? Rong Xiu clearly knew that he was ill. How could he take things too hard and enter the 9 Netherworld Tower? We did not dare to deceive your majesty and could only tell the truth. In fact, before the 9 Netherworld Tower changed, all the students were driven out. Then, in the 9 Netherworld Tower, the black karmic fire burned. But it was at that time that His Highness King Li entered the 9 Netherworld Tower. He swallowed hard. Elder Wei Yun and the others tried to stop him, but they could not. It was an extremely simple sentence, but it contained a huge amount of information. Emperor Zhaoan took a while to react and asked in disbelief, "You mean, he went through the fire and entered?" Because of shock, his voice trembled a little. Zhuo Rong and the others could only nod. Yes. In fact, weren't they also full of horror? Rong Xiu's action was tantamount to courting death. Later, we also tried to go in, but the fire was too big, there was no way. Zhuo Rong said and lowered his head. He knew that his explanation sounded weak and feeble, although it was the truth. But they really did not protect Rong Xiu. If something really happened to Rong Xiu... Emperor Zhaoan raised his head and stared blankly at the 9 Netherworld Tower surrounded by the black karmic fire. His face was pale and he did not speak for a long time. The Empress stood beside him, her wrist was unconsciously pinched by him to the point that it hurt. Without looking, she knew that it must be bruised. But she quietly endured it. What was this pain? Hearing the news that Rong Xiu was trapped in the 9 Netherworld Tower was enough to offset this pain. If Rong Xiu went to such a dangerous place, could he still survive? She was originally worried about how to deal with this thorn in her side, but she did not expect that he would send himself to death. Zhuo Rong said very clearly that it was Rong Xiu himself who wanted to go in. So if he died, no one could be blamed. At least, it had nothing to do with her mother and son. The Empress suppressed the joy in her heart and her pair of willow-shaped eyebrows tightly knitted. She comforted, "Your Majesty, don't be anxious. Prince Li has always done things with propriety. There must be a reason for him to do this. Now that Elder Yi is also here, I believe that Prince Li will be safe." At this time, Emperor Zhaoan did not listen to a single word. Elder Yi was indeed here, but who could not see that the heaven sealing array would not last long? Moreover, even the 9 Netherworld Tower was beginning to collapse. Quickly think of a way to save Rong Xiu. Emperor Zhaoan murmured and suddenly saw Mu Qinghe's figure from the corner of his eyes. His eyes lit up as if he had seen the last straw. Deputy General Mu. Deputy General Mu. Hearing this, Mu Qinghe looked at Emperor Zhaoan. He was naturally aware of the movements on Emperor Zhaoan's side. He also knew that Emperor Zhaoan wanted to ask him for help. However, he had no intention of making a move. Looking at Mu Qinghe's cold and indifferent expression, Emperor Zhaoan felt very apprehensive. But at this juncture, he could not think of any other way and could only plead, "Deputy General Mu, your strength is superb. You can definitely, don't save him." Mu Qinghe straightforwardly interrupted Emperor Zhaoan's words, leaving no room for discussion. Emperor Zhaoan's face turned even paler. Just when he wanted to continue fighting, Mu Qinghe said again, "He is not in any danger now, why should we save him?" Inside the Jiuyo Tower. Bang! The red demon suffered a blow, and its body flew backward, falling heavily to the ground. The green flames on its body had also become much weaker. Red Demon. Chu Luiyue immediately went forward. The red demon struggled to get up, but in the end, it still fell down. On its wing, there was a bloody wound. Chu Luiyue carefully picked it up and looked back. In the transparent medicine cauldron, the aura of the phantom formed by the black hellfire had also weakened a lot. The two of them fought fiercely and actually ended in a draw. Chu Luiyue knew that the red demon had fought with the other party before and was injured. Therefore, she did not dare to underestimate it in the slightest. However, she did not expect that the red demon would still be evenly matched with the other party when it attacked with all its might. If she really let this thing escape, she really did not know how much trouble it would cause. At this moment, Chu Luiyue saw another stream of light flash past the transparent medicine cauldron. This time, it was much clearer than before. Chu Luiyue could even tell that the stream of light seemed to be following the strange lines on the medicine cauldron. She did not know if it was her imagination. She had a feeling that after the stream of light flashed, the lines on the medicine cauldron seemed to be clearer than before. The red demon lay in Chu Luiyue's arms, but it still stared at the medicine cauldron, its eyes filled with indignation. It had already embarrassed itself enough to lose once, but it did not expect to lose the second time. If this were to spread, would its reputation still exist? It moved and wanted to fight again, but it just flapped its wings weakly. Chu Luiyue said, "You're injured now, so you'd better behave first." The red demon immediately obediently retracted its wings. But thinking that it would appear very useless after this fight, it could not help but bury its head in a fit of pique. Chu Luiyue understood. "You want me to help you get revenge?" Only then did the red demon poke its head out and answer pitifully. Tuanzi glanced at it contemptuously and sneered. It was useless. The red demon immediately glared at it fiercely. Chu Luiyue patted its head and smiled helplessly. "All right. Just wait by the side." The red demon then reluctantly left and flew to the side. Before leaving, it did not forget to raise its head at the black hellfire with an arrogant look as if it had found a backer. Chu Luiyue held her forehead. The red demon did not seem to realize that she was no longer who she used to be. She was really not sure whether she could win or not. Thinking of this, she turned over her palm. With a thought, a crimson flame suddenly rose into the sky. Almost at the same time, above the transparent medicine cauldron, endless flowing light suddenly gushed out. The lines on it quickly became clear. Boom. Digression, I'm going out and will be back very late. So there may not be 5 updates. If there is, it will be very late. You can read it tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. For a better reading experience, please visit the website. Chapter 303. Chu Luiyue was shocked. "You're the legendary three-eyed eagle." It was rumored that this divine beast was born in the far north desert and had the ability to see through heaven and earth. She had never seen a real divine beast in her 2 lives. The reason she knew about the legendary three-eyed eagle was that she had accidentally read about it in the secret history of the Tianling dynasty. She had never thought that she would meet such a divine beast. Although it was just a soul, it was already shocking enough. The legendary three-eyed eagle nodded. After a while, it seemed to be worried that Chu Luiyue wouldn't believe it, so it closed its eyes. After a short silence, a vertical pupil suddenly appeared in the middle of its eyes. There was no pupil in that vertical pupil, only a round, scarlet eyeball. It looked very strange. Chu Luiyue frowned and asked suspiciously. "Isn't the third eye of the legendary three-eyed eagle silver? Why is yours red?" This time, it was the legendary three-eyed eagle's turn to be surprised. "You've seen my race." Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment. "My ancestor has seen it before." The legendary three-eyed eagle looked at Chu Luiyue meaningfully and said slowly, "My third eye was indeed silver. My divine eye was indeed silver-white in the past, but it was completely destroyed in the battle 1,000 years ago. It was also because of this that I was trapped here for 1,000 years." Chu Luiyue instantly understood. I see. No wonder someone would spend so much effort to build Joyo Tower. It was because they wanted to suppress a divine beast. When she first found out that there was a divine beast suppressed in the pit of heavenly origins, she was still shocked. However, everything made sense if it was the legendary three-eyed eagle. Other than this level of existence, other divine beasts couldn't possibly survive in the pit of heavenly origins for 1,000 years. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment. Actually, this heavenly square cauldron is really used to suppress you, right? An extremely sharp glint flashed across the legendary three-eyed eagle's eyes. Chu Luiyue smiled faintly. After a short confrontation, the legendary three-eyed eagle finally said, I forgot. I forgot that the heavenly square Saint Cauldron is already in your body. In other words, it had already recognized Chu Luiyue as its master. Chu Luiyue naturally knew everything about it. Not bad. Although there were restrictions on Joyo Tower, they didn't pose a threat to him at all. Even with the existence of the heaven sealing formation, it was unable to truly trap it. If there was only Joyo Tower, it would have escaped long ago. Unfortunately, there was still the heavenly square cauldron. That was the real reason why it had been trapped for 1,000 years. Chu Luiyue looked around but did not see any bones. Then your skeleton, the karmic fire in the heavenly square cauldron is enough to incinerate everything. The legendary three-eyed eagle said coldly. Chu Luiyue was a little confused. Since this thing is so powerful, why hasn't your soul dissipated after being burned for so long? As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Luiyue could feel the hatred in the legendary three-eyed eagle's eyes. He did it on purpose. He did it on purpose. Its voice suddenly became sharp, causing Chu Luiyue to feel a sharp pain in his ears. He? Who is he? The person who suppressed the legendary three-eyed eagle here. What on purpose? Chu Luiyue asked instinctively. These words seemed to evoke the painful past of the legendary three-eyed eagle. It let out a shrill cry, filled with endless resentment and grief. He suppressed me in Joyo Tower, burned me with the karmic fire in the heavenly square cauldron, and nourished me with the force of the pit of heavenly origins. He made me suffer between life and death. Generation after generation. Never to be reincarnated. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled slightly. So that's how it is. So that's how it is. This way, the legendary three-eyed eagle could suffer this terrifying punishment day and night, and it could never escape death. Death would be the end of it, but the most terrifying thing was that it would be worse than death. Who knew what kind of grudge that person had with the legendary three-eyed eagle? However, from the way he punished it, he was indeed a ruthless person. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but recall all the rumors about Tianlu Academy in her mind. However, after thinking about it, she realized that she knew very little about the founder of Tianlu Academy, who was also the first dean. She didn't even know that person's name. In fact, she wasn't the only one. The others didn't seem to be familiar with him either. Tianlu Academy was an extremely special existence in country Yaoqin. Everyone knew that it was a top-notch academy for cultivators, but very few people knew about Tianlu Academy's earliest history. So you've been trying to get out of here all this time? Chu Luiyue asked softly. The legendary three-eyed eagle sneered. That's right. He thought that he was smart and found a balance between the two. He thought that he could make me suffer for eternity. However, he didn't expect that water would penetrate a stone. 1,000 years was really too long. Even it didn't know how it had endured day by day. When it was suppressed at the beginning, it was in so much pain that it wanted to die. However, to it, even death was a luxury. Later, it discovered that it could devour the force in the pit of heavenly origins. It contained violent and ferocious impurities. An ordinary fiend might have already exploded and died. However, it was a divine beast, and the karmic fire in the heavenly square cauldron happened to be able to refine it. Over time, it would be able to silently absorb energy from it and gradually become stronger. Until today, it could finally take a gamble. It had seen the locking heaven formation 1,000 years ago and knew how to break it long ago. Chu Luiyue suddenly asked, "Why did you do that? Then, why did you target me when I entered Joyo Tower?" The legendary three-eyed eagle fell silent. After a while, it said in a gloomy voice, "Because there's an extremely powerful force in your body. I want to obtain this power, which is why I attacked you." Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes. Was it referring to the water droplet in her dantian? "You're indeed different from ordinary people, aren't you? Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to reach the 7th level." Chu Luiyue glanced at Dumpling. She was different from ordinary people, and Dumpling was also very different from ordinary fiends. "Now, since you're the owner of the heavenly square cauldron, I won't be your enemy." Chu Luiyue didn't comment. Right now, everyone outside must be on high alert. The Academy's elders and teachers want to suppress you again. If I let you go, how should I deal with this situation? The legendary three-eyed eagle fell silent. Moreover, you're in a soul state now. Even if I let you go, how far can you escape? Without the force in the pit of heavenly origins, how long can you survive? Chu Luiyue asked lightly. A hint of struggle flashed across the legendary three-eyed eagle's eyes. After a long while, it suddenly raised its head and looked at Chu Luiyue. "As long as you agree to extinguish the karmic fire in the heavenly square cauldron, I'm willing to follow you." Chapter 304. Oh. Really? Chu Luiyue seemed to be a little tempted. "Of course. Although I don't have a physical body now, I still have my strength. If I were to follow you, I would be considered as your right-hand man." As the legendary three-eyed eagle spoke, its cold gaze swept across Dumpling and Hong Yao. Although it didn't say anything, its meaning was already very obvious. As a mythical beast, it was the strongest existence here. Not to mention country Yao Qin, even in the entire Black Tortoise continent, mythical beasts were existences that could look down on the world. Dumpling instantly exploded and bared its teeth. What kind of gaze is that? Isn't it just a mythical beast? What's so great about it? It doesn't even have a physical body. It's far worse than the others. Hong Yao rolled its eyes and flew to Chu Luiyue's shoulder. It didn't seem to intend to get involved in this matter and just seriously combed its feathers. Then, a feather with faint bloodstains fell, seemingly unintentionally floating in front of Chu Luiyue's eyes. Hong Yao was stunned and then leaned on Chu Luiyue's neck aggrievedly, its eyes filled with tears. Although it didn't say anything, this series of actions was silently accusing the legendary three-eyed eagle of its previous atrocities. Chu Luiyue smiled helplessly and touched its wings. "All right, I know you're in pain. Look at its current situation. It's much worse than you. You've taken your revenge, right?" Hong Yao turned its head and sobbed even harder. Chu Luiyue was speechless. Why do I feel that Hong Yao's personality is even more delicate than before? "Hong Yao, if your master sees this scene," Hong Yao's body stiffened. Mu Qinghe's heart had always been cold. No matter how much Hong Yao acted coquettishly, angry, and pitiful, it was useless against Mu Qinghe. It was also because it was now beside Chu Luiyue that it was so unscrupulous. "If you feel too free, I can send you back at any time." Hearing this, Red Demon finally recognized the situation in front of it and stayed aside obediently. That mythological beast wasn't that powerful either. Previously, it was pretending to be a big-tailed wolf. Now, wasn't it submitting to Chu Luiyue? Even if it had to follow Chu Luiyue in the end, it would be ranked behind it. At that time, it would be a good opportunity to teach it the rules of first come, first served. Thinking of this, Red Demon was finally in a good mood. It flapped its wings with satisfaction. Chu Luiyue looked at the legendary three-eyed eagle. With the help of a divine beast, who wouldn't be tempted? Even she felt the same way. Now that she was alone and weak, if she could really have the help of such a powerful divine beast, it would definitely be a lot more convenient. The eyes of the legendary three-eyed eagle flickered. So, I don't agree. Chu Luiyue smiled and rejected the suggestion of the legendary three-eyed eagle. I can let you stay in the heavenly square cauldron and take you out. This way, no one will find out that you're hiding on my body, and you'll be able to escape. However, I will not extinguish the hellfire in the heavenly square cauldron. Of course, I will provide you with nutrients. Although the water droplet in my dantian is not the pit of heavenly origins, it contains abundant energy. As long as you want, I can give you a portion of it at regular intervals to ensure that you can continue to maintain your current strength or even become stronger. Agree or disagree, you can choose now. Chu Luiyue wasn't stupid. The legendary three-eyed eagle was a divine beast. Although it didn't have a physical body, its remnant soul obviously couldn't be underestimated. At least, it wasn't something that a mere stage 2 warrior like her could control. If she really let the legendary three-eyed eagle escape, its first target might be her. The only thing that could restrain it was the hellfire in the heavenly square cauldron. How could she agree to extinguish the hellfire? The legendary three-eyed eagle stared at Chu Luiyue. The human race is as cunning as always. No. You're worse than him. Back then, that person had a blood feud with it, so he thought of such a cruel way to torture it. Although it was full of resentment, it had to accept it. But now, what about Chu Luiyue? She actually wanted to take advantage of the fact that she had become the owner of the heavenly square cauldron to control and make use of it. You're not helping me at all, you're just making use of me. Chu Luiyue's smile deepened as she admitted frankly. Yes. In her previous life, she trusted too easily and ended up in a miserable state. Facing a legendary three-eyed eagle that had been trapped for 1,000 years, she naturally had to be more vigilant. So, do you agree or not? If you feel humiliated, it's fine. For the sake of this heavenly square cauldron, I can give you a quick death. Chu Luiyue said very generously. The legendary three-eyed eagle fell into silence and didn't speak for a long time. Chu Luiyue shrugged. Since that's the case, don't blame me, fine, I'll grant you that. The legendary three-eyed eagle suddenly shouted. Chu Luiyue smiled until her eyes turned into crescents. Wouldn't it have been better if you had agreed earlier? You've wasted so much time. The legendary three-eyed eagle felt that if it still had its physical body, it would probably vomit blood because of Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes and held her breath. The floating water droplets suddenly fell into the last cluster of black karmic fire in the heavenly square cauldron. Ah! The legendary three-eyed eagle let out a shrill cry. What are you doing? Chu Luiyue smiled faintly. You said earlier that you and the heavenly square cauldron had been interdependent for 1,000 years. I thought that the karmic fire should already contain your power, right? If I don't check it properly, I'm afraid I won't even know how I died. As she spoke, Chu Luiyue checked the last cluster of karmic fire. There seemed to be something burning fiercely in the black karmic fire, letting out a strange sizzling sound. The cries of the legendary three-eyed eagle were mixed in. Chu Luiyue turned a deaf ear. Soon, the karmic fire, which was originally pure black, gradually changed color. Chu Luiyue's eyes narrowed, as expected. The karmic fire was indeed mixed with too much of the legendary three-eyed eagle's power. Just now, it pretended to be deeply hurt and begged Chu Luiyue to extinguish the karmic fire, but in fact, it was to provoke Chu Luiyue to leave the karmic fire. This was the most convenient way for it. However, it didn't expect Chu Luiyue to see through its plan. Gradually, the sound of its screeching grew weaker. The black color of the cluster of karmic fire also gradually faded. When the last trace of impurities was removed, the last cluster of karmic fire had become completely transparent and had completely merged with the originally transparent heavenly square cauldron. Only the flickering swastika character could be clearly seen. The legendary three-eyed eagle's translucent soul was also in it, and it had completely fainted because of its weakness. Chu Luiyue opened his eyes and looked at his palm. A faint swastika character was faintly discernible. Then, she looked at her surroundings. It was empty. Boom! A huge rock suddenly fell from the top of her head. She was shocked. Joyo Tower was really going to collapse. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 305. She turned around to leave. Dumpling, Hongyao, let's go. The heavenly square cauldron had become hers, and the legendary three-eyed eagle was in her hands. Joyo Tower could no longer support itself. Bang! Boom! Bam! More and more rocks fell and smashed onto the ground. Smoke and dust rose everywhere. Chu Luiyue quickly rushed to the stairs of the 7th floor, wanting to go down. However, he suddenly realized that the barrier that had been bitten by Tuanzi had already been restored to its original state. Moreover, there seemed to be a cage outside the barrier. Chu Luiyue frowned. Suddenly, the cage outside disappeared silently. A familiar tall figure gradually appeared. A thought flashed across Chu Luiyue's mind. Could it be? The next moment, the person opposite her seemed to reach out and gently tapped on the barrier. The barrier silently split from the middle. A cold and devilish face appeared in front of her. Chu Luiyue opened her mouth. Rongxiu. Why are you here? Rongxiu's eyes were deep. Suddenly, he pulled her into his arms. Boom! An entire wall suddenly collapsed and smashed onto the spot where Chu Luiyue was standing just now. Chu Luiyue leaned against Rongxiu's arms and looked back. The originally empty 7th floor was in a mess, and the ground was filled with rocks. She gently exhaled. Although she could avoid this level of danger, she felt more at ease with Rongxiu here. She remembered that Rongxiu wasn't around when she came in. This meant that he came in after her. You came in after Joyo Tower changed? Chu Luiyue asked softly. Rongxiu grunted and hugged her even tighter. Chu Luiyue looked up at him. Elder Wei Yun didn't stop you. As the person guarding Joyo Tower, Elder Wei Yun would definitely sense that something was wrong with Joyo Tower immediately. Logically speaking, he would never allow Rongxiu to enter like this. Rongxiu looked at the worry in her clear and bright eyes, and his lips curved up. Of course I did. He didn't manage to stop her. Are you worried? Of course, Chu Luiyue was worried. Joyo Tower was so dangerous, and Rongxiu had barged in just like that. Elder Wei Yun and the rest would definitely be suspicious. Previously, he had been hiding it well. If something was exposed because of this, don't worry. Rongxiu lowered his head and kissed her soft lips. The cool and soft touch made Chu Luiyue's heart empty. Rongxiu's indistinct syllables came from between his lips and teeth. You just have to put on a show with me. Chu Luiyue was stunned. What? Rongxiu chuckled and bit her lips gently. Chu Luiyue opened her mouth instinctively. Rongxiu attacked her and hugged her for a while before he stopped before he lost control. Chu Liuyue's eyes were watery from his kiss. Rongxiu glanced at her, then his gaze landed on her red and full lips. His eyes darkened. It was a pity that Jiuyou Tower was about to collapse. Otherwise, they could have stayed here for a while longer. Although he had already considered that he would have to go out and meet those people later and didn't dare to go overboard, he still couldn't control himself and kissed her until her lips were slightly red and swollen. He held Chu Liuyue's face and pressed his thumb against her lips gently. A good show. Chu Liuyue looked at him in confusion. The next moment, Rongxiu suddenly let go of her. He walked to the side and casually picked up a stone. Chu Liuyue suddenly had a strange premonition. Rip! With a calm expression, Rongxiu used the sharp edges of the stone to harshly cut his arm. His snow-white clothes were instantly torn apart. A wound so deep that his bones could be seen immediately appeared on his arm. Fresh blood spurted out and quickly dyed his clothes red. Rongxiu! Chu Liuyue immediately went forward, grabbed his wrist, and asked anxiously. What are you doing? Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly and moved closer to her ear. His voice was low and pleasant. Beauty, you risked your life to save me. I have nothing to repay you with. I can only repay you with my body. Chu Liuyue widened her eyes slightly. You, Rongxiu actually planned to rip. Rongxiu made another cut on his hand. Chu Liuyue's heart was throbbing painfully. She pressed his hand down. Rongxiu, you don't have to do this. You really don't have to do this. There are many reasons. You can just think of one. You don't have to. But that's not as convincing as this. Rongxiu smiled faintly. That would be troublesome. This is better. Anne. I don't want to wait any longer. There was no better reason than this to let the two of them be together. Opportunities were hard to come by. What was such a small injury to him? Chu Liuyue's heart trembled violently. For some reason, the tip of her nose suddenly felt a little sore. Rongxiu kissed her eyes. If you don't want to look, then don't look. We'll be out soon. Chu Liuyue shook her head. No. It's not that I don't want to look. I just... She paused, then said in a low voice. I can't bear to. Although her voice was low, it was incomparably firm. Rongxiu was stunned. Then, the corners of his eyes and the tips of his brows were tinged with a smile. With your words, even if I'm covered in bruises, it's still worth it. With that, he raised his hand again and made another cut on his body. Boom! Jiuyou Tower collapsed even more. Rongxiu pulled Chu Liuyue into his arms. Stones rolled down. Chu Liuyue leaned tightly against Rongxiu's chest. Her entire body was protected in his arms, and she couldn't see anything. However, she could clearly hear the sound of everything collapsing around her. And those stones fell on Rongxiu's body with dull thuds. One and another. Chu Liuyue's heart also seemed to have been hit hard by something. Chapter 306. Hong Long Long. Jiuyou Tower suddenly collapsed. Despair was written all over everyone's faces. Jiuyou Tower had been in Tianlu Academy for thousands of years, and they had always been proud of it. Nobody would have thought that it would be destroyed in such a way. The most important thing was that there was a terrifying ferocious beast inside. Sun Zhongyan looked at Yi Zhiding nervously. Uncle Master, the locking heaven formation has been broken, and Jiuyou Tower has completely collapsed. What should we do next? Yi Zhiding knitted his brows and stared at the ruins. That's not right. Sun Zhongyan was dazed. What's not right? Since all the restrictions have been broken, that beast should have rushed out. Why hasn't there been any movement yet? Upon hearing this, Sun Zhongyan immediately realized something. You're saying, Yijing shook his head and walked forward. Uncle Master. Sun Zhongyan immediately stopped him. It's dangerous. Yijing waved the blood-stained fan in his hand and chuckled. No matter what, I'm still the director. How can I not go and take a look when such a big thing has happened? He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the ferocious beast's aura seemed to have disappeared. He didn't notice when he had this feeling, but at this point, he really couldn't sense any danger from the ruins. Sun Zhongyan hurriedly said, I'll go with you. The two of them went forward together. Emperor Jiawen looked at this scene dejectedly as if all his energy had been sucked out. Jiuyou Tower was already in danger when it was surrounded by the black fire. Now, Jiuyou Tower had completely collapsed into ruins. Rongxiu, I'm afraid, the Empress held his arm and softly consoled him. Your Majesty, my condolences, what nonsense are you saying? Emperor Jiawen was agitated by the words, and he pushed her harshly. The Empress didn't notice, and her body fell to the ground uncontrollably. I want to see him if he's alive, and I want to see his corpse if he's dead. Everything isn't clear yet. Who allowed you to curse him to die? Hollered Emperor Jiawen as his face flushed red, and his veins popped out. The surroundings instantly quietened down. Countless pairs of eyes landed on the Empress. The Empress felt like there was a blade on her back, and she was embarrassed. As the Empress, she had always been high and mighty. When had she ever suffered such humiliation? Although His Majesty did not dote on her much, he had always been very respectful. He had never laid a hand on her, and even rarely reprimanded her. But now, in front of all these people, she had lost all her face. Your Highness. Eunuch Min hurriedly stepped forward. Nyang Nyang, are you all right? As he spoke, he didn't forget to reprimand the person beside him. Are you all blind? What are you waiting for? The palace servants, who were shocked on the spot, finally reacted. They hurriedly went forward and helped the Empress up in a flurry. The Empress Phoenix hairpin was already a little crooked, and there was a lot of dust on her exquisite and luxurious palace dress. She looked very disheveled. The palace servants only took a glance and quickly lowered their heads, not daring to say anything. The Empress took a deep breath, pushed them away, and forced a smile. I'm fine. His Majesty was worried about Prince Li and was anxious. Go. Find it for me. Even if he had to dig 3 feet into the ground, he had to find it. Emperor Jiawen didn't seem to notice what was happening here as he only cared about Rongxiu. He hollered at the people below. The Empress choked on her words, and her face burned. This was equivalent to 2 tight slaps on her face. The surrounding gazes were like sharp knives that almost pierced through her. She wanted to leave immediately, but she clearly couldn't. She took a deep breath in and suppressed all her emotions. She tidied her phoenix hairpin and bowed to Emperor Jiawen. Your Majesty, please forgive me. I misspoke. Actually, I'm very worried about Prince Li. Emperor Jiawen coldly glanced at her as if he had seen through everything. The Empress's heart skipped a beat, and she couldn't say the rest of her words. She guiltily turned away. Emperor Jiawen chuckled in his heart. The Empress looked dignified and magnanimous, but that wasn't the case in reality. She didn't like that person back then, so she naturally wouldn't like her son now. If something really happened to Rongxiu, she would be happier than anyone else. In the past, he just turned a blind eye to it, but he couldn't be bothered to deal with her now. On the other side, Chu Ning had already rushed over with his men. He directly walked in a certain direction. His footsteps were hurried, and his expression was tense. The compass shows that you, is here, so she should be fine. Chu Ning walked to a certain spot and wanted to move a rock away. However, he quickly realized that the problem was more serious than he thought. The material used to build Joyo Tower was very special. It was just a rock that was half a person's height, but it weighed almost a ton. He was a stage 5 warrior, and he was considered a top warrior in the entire country Yaoqin. However, even for him, it was not an easy task to clear all the rocks here. When the Imperial guards saw Chu Ning's reaction, they hurriedly followed him. "Lord, did you discover something?" Chu Ning shook his head and didn't say anything, but he didn't stop moving. The crowd looked at each other. They had also heard from Tianlu Academy's people that Lord Chu Ning's only daughter, Chu Luyue, was also trapped inside. She was most likely dead. "Go over there and move all the rocks away," Chu Ning ordered. The subordinates dispersed. Chu Ning dug with all his might, and a few cuts appeared on his hands, which were dripping with blood. However, he didn't seem to be affected as he stubbornly cleared the rocks away. Everyone had different expressions when they saw this scene. What's wrong with Lord Chu Ning? Although His Majesty asked us to find someone, isn't he a little too stubborn? Could it be that he really intends to dig up this pile of ruins? Sure. Don't you know that Chu Luyue is also inside? Ah. I see. Then, isn't she also? What a pity. Lord Chu Ning has been through a lot all these years. Now that he finally made it, something like this happened. Chu Ning turned a deaf ear to everyone's discussion. Then, he realized that there were a few more people beside him. He looked up and saw a few familiar young faces. Hongyu. It was Mu Hongyu, Tsinhu, and Gu Mingfeng. Mu Hongyu's eyes were red, but she looked very determined. "Uncle, we're here to help you." Chu Ning's heart warmed as he nodded. "Help me here." The few of them immediately took action. Even Zhuo Rong and the rest couldn't bear to see this scene. "Lord Chu Ning, we know that you're very worried about Lu Yu, but none of us wanted this to happen." Screech. A crisp cry suddenly came from the ruins. Then, a few rocks that were piled up together were suddenly blown away by a ball of green flames. A green sparrow flew out quickly. 2 figures appeared in front of everyone. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 307. Prince Li. Everyone was shocked when they saw the two of them. Who else could it be but Chu Luyue and Rong Xiu, who were previously trapped in Joyo Tower? Chu Ning immediately walked over with big strides. Are you okay?" he asked nervously as he sized up Chu Luyue. When he saw that Chu Luyue's body was covered in blood and dust, his heart skipped a beat. "You're injured." Chu Luyue's lips were dry and white as he weakly shook his head. "No, it's mainly because His Highness." Chu Ning then saw that Chu Luyue was supporting Rong Xiu, and his situation seemed to be even worse. His face was as pale as a sheet, and he was barely breathing as if he would faint at any moment. There were many wounds on his body, and some were so deep that his bones could be seen. What happened to His Highness? 7. Emperor Jiawen was surprised when he saw Rong Xiu come out, and he hurriedly walked over. But when he saw Rong Xiu covered in wounds, the joy on his face immediately disappeared, and it was replaced by deep shock and worry. 7. What happened to you? Zhuo Rong. Elder son. Come and take a look. Zhuo Rong was originally at the side, and he immediately went forward when he heard this. Sun Zhongyan, Elder Yi, and the rest, who were planning to enter the ruins, also rushed over when they heard the commotion. Ever since the Empress saw Chu Luyue and Rongxiu appear, she stood rooted to the ground and didn't recover her senses for a long time. The two of them actually didn't die. Jiuyou Tower caused such a huge commotion. First, it burned, and then it completely collapsed. Just how lucky were they to be able to come out alive? But when she saw that Emperor Jiawen had already walked over, she clenched her teeth and could only follow. Zuo Rong helped Rongxiu take his pulse. Emperor Jiawen asked, "How are you? How is it?" Zuo Rong frowned and thought for a moment. "Don't worry too much, Your Majesty. Most of His Highness' injuries are just superficial wounds. As long as he recuperates well, he will recover very quickly." The rock in Emperor Jiawen's heart was finally put down. That's good, that's good. Although he was injured, he was still alive. This was much better than what he had expected. Zuo Rong said hesitantly. But what? Emperor Jiawen was dazed. But His Highness's body has always been weak. Previously, it was not easy to nurse him back to health. This time, I'm afraid he will have to recuperate again. Disappointment filled Emperor Jiawen's eyes. Rongxiu had been ill since he was a child. Now that he finally got better, he didn't expect it. Forget it, let's talk about this later. The most important thing now is to heal Old Seven's injuries. Rongxiu forced a smile on his pale lips and said in a low voice, "Imperial Father." Emperor Jiawen hurriedly said, "Yes. You rest first. If you have anything to say it later." At this moment, Yi Zhiding and Sun Zhongyan had already walked over. "Girl. How are you?" The first person that Yi Zhiding saw was his precious disciple. Chu Luyue hurriedly said, "Master, I'm fine. Master, I'm fine. You should take a look at His Highness Prince Li first." Even though she looked disheveled, Yi Zhiding saw that her voice was filled with energy, and he felt much more at ease. That's good. That's good. Even though he really wanted to take Chu Luyue's pulse, on second thought, his precious disciple might be better than him in this aspect. Thus, he decided to give up. She always knew what to do. Hence, he turned his gaze to Rongxiu. He stepped forward and asked Zuo Rong, "How's his condition? How's he?" Zuo Rong gave a simple explanation. As Yi Zhiding listened, he took Rongxiu's pulse again. Everyone present knew that Yi Zhiding was the most capable celestial physician here, so nobody felt that it was unnecessary for him to take Rongxiu's pulse a second time. Instead, they felt much more at ease. After a moment of silence, Yi Zhiding nodded and took out a pill to feed Rongxiu. "Your Highness's body is fine. I'll help you stop the bleeding first, and I'll treat your wounds when we go back. In less than half a month, your external injuries will be healed. However, your internal injuries. Old Seven still has internal injuries?" Emperor Jiawen couldn't help but interrupt. Yi Zhiding looked at him as if it was natural. Of course. The injuries on his body were obviously caused by the falling rubble. Jiuyou Tower's rocks are very heavy, so it's normal for them to cause internal injuries. However, it's fine. The pill that I gave you earlier can improve your blood circulation and heal your internal injuries. He might need a month to fully recover, but Your Majesty, you don't have to be overly worried. Emperor Jiawen was both happy and worried. He knew that this was the best outcome, so he could only nod. "Thank you, Elder Yi." Yi Zhiding softly said a few more words to Zuo Rong. Zuo Rong wiped the sweat off his forehead in embarrassment. "Thank you for your advice, Director." He was too anxious just now, and he wasn't very proficient in this area. Hence, he didn't realize that something had happened to Rongxiu's internal injuries. Luckily, Emperor Jiawen's heart was on Rongxiu, so he didn't pay attention to this point. "Old Seven, you can't do this again in the future. Jiuyo Tower is so dangerous, how can you go there? Said Emperor Zhaoan softly. It seemed like a reprimand, but everyone could hear the worry in his words. After today's incident, everyone in the Imperial city would know how much His Majesty cared about Prince Li. Even the Crown Prince might not receive such treatment. Some people gathered together and whispered to each other. I've long heard that His Majesty favors Prince Li a lot. If not, he wouldn't have conferred him the title of Prince the moment he came back. It seems like it's true now. All these years, have you seen His Majesty cares so much about any prince or princess? Even the arrogant and despotic fourth princess wasn't like this, right? The fourth princess has already become a good-for-nothing. How can she be compared? On the other hand, haven't you heard that the Crown Prince angered His Majesty a while ago, and he was put under house arrest in Crown Prince Mansion for a long time? He even took back some of his privileges. Is His Majesty biased? Shh. Lower your voice. Can't you see that His Majesty and the Empress are still here? I don't think so. Think about it. Even if His Majesty really dotes on Prince Li the most, how can a sickly person take on such a big responsibility? That's true. However, if Prince Li's body is better, he might really become a formidable opponent for the Crown Prince. The Empress could only hear bits and pieces of the soft discussions. However, this was enough to make her feel very aggrieved. She forcefully suppressed the tumultuous emotions in her heart and looked at Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu. Prince Li, I heard that you went in after Jiuyo Tower burned. It was so dangerous then, why did you go in? Her voice was gentle, and there was a faint smile on her lips. However, her eyes were cold. I heard that only Ms. Chu was inside at that time. Your Highness, you didn't get injured because you wanted to save her, did you? Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. Chapter 308. The Empress gently said this sentence, but it was like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue. It was filled with evil intentions. Once she confirmed that this was the case, it wasn't a good thing for Rongxiu and Chu Luiyue. In that case, Rongxiu would become an infatuated man who would do anything for a woman in the eyes of the public, and Chu Luiyue would be called a troublemaker. No matter how much Emperor Zhaoan favored Rongxiu, he couldn't hand his career to such a person. At least, the officials in the Imperial court wouldn't agree. Needless to say, Chu Luiyue. The royal family had always avoided such women like snakes and scorpions. As expected, the moment she said that, Emperor Zhaoan's expression froze. The situation was too tense just now, so he didn't have time to think about this. Now that the Empress mentioned it, he also felt that something was amiss. Rongxiu, Lu Yu, is what the Empress said true? He sized the two of them up suspiciously. Thinking back, the two of them did come out together. Did Rongxiu really go in for Chu Luiyue? Perhaps it was because he had taken Yi Zhiding's pill, but Rongxiu's complexion looked better now. His pale lips moved slightly, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Father, that's not the case. I went in for another reason. I just happened to meet Miss Chu in the middle, so we came out together. The Empress sneered in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. Oh. So, it's just a coincidence? But why are your injuries so serious, Prince Li? On the other hand, Miss Chu doesn't seem to have any major injuries. People who don't know would think that you were injured because you wanted to save her. As she spoke, she glanced at Emperor Zhaoan and sighed. Luckily, Prince Li is blessed by the heavens. If not, I don't know how sad your Majesty would be. Don't you think so, your Majesty? Emperor Zhaoan's gaze swept past Chu Luiyue with a hint of scrutiny. The Empress's words made sense. Anyone who saw the situation between the two would find it strange. Speaking of which, Prince Li and Miss Chu are really fated to meet. At the Crown Prince's birthday banquet, Prince Li seemed to take special care of Miss Chu. Emperor Jiawen knitted his brows slightly. That was right. He also remembered this matter. Even though it was just a small matter, it was indeed a little strange now that he thought about it. The Empress lowered her voice and suddenly smiled. Your Majesty, please don't take it to heart. I was just speaking casually. Prince Li had not been in the capital for many years, so he should not have been familiar with Miss Chu before. These were just groundless guesses. Moreover, if Prince Li really liked Miss Chu, it would make a good story. But Emperor Jiawen didn't look happy at all. Rong Xiao smiled gently. Imperial Father, I actually have to thank Miss Chu for today. If she hadn't saved me in time, I'm afraid I would have died in Joyo Tower. Everyone was stunned. Emperor Jiawen couldn't help but ask. You said that Lu Yu saved you. Exactly. At that time, cough cough, Rong Xiao clenched his fists and coughed a few times on his lips. When Joyo Tower started to collapse, I was coincidentally trapped on the 6th floor. The injuries on my body were caused at that time. Back then, the 6th floor was sealed by the collapsed rocks. I tried my best to get out, but I couldn't. Coincidentally, I met Miss Chu at that time. She helped me and brought me out without caring about the danger. Only then could I see the light of day again. If not. Rong Xiao didn't continue speaking, but his meaning was clear. Emperor Jiawen's expression became much gentler. So, you weren't injured because of her. Instead, she saved you. Rong Xiao lightly nodded. Imperial Father is wise. Emperor Jiawen then heaved a sigh of relief. The way he looked at Chu Luyue was also very different from before. I see. Lu Yu, it seems like I still have to thank you this time. Rong Xiao hasn't been by my side for so many years. Now that he's finally recovered, he's finally back in the Imperial City. If something really happens, how am I going to explain it to Wan He? His voice suddenly paused, and pain flashed across his face. The Empress looked down and hid the jealousy in her eyes. Then, she seemingly smiled and said, Oh, I see. So that's how it is. This consort really made a mistake. I didn't expect Miss Chu to be able to save Prince Li from such a dangerous place despite her slender body. She's really amazing. Chu Luyue raised her brows slightly. It seems like the Empress isn't willing to give up. Rong Xiao has already said so much, yet she still wants to drag me down. It's a pity that such small tricks don't work on me. Rong Xiao lightly smiled. Miss Chu took first place in both the Warrior and Xian Master categories in the Qing Jiao competition. I've been sick for a long time, so I naturally can't be compared to her in this aspect. The Empress was stumped. I actually forgot about this. Although Chu Luyue looks slender, she's very capable. Chu Luyue bent her knees and bowed humbly. You flatter me, Your Majesty. Although Lu Yu's insignificant skills don't catch your eye, it's my honor to be able to help Prince Li. The Empress was speechless. If Chu Luyue's skills are considered insignificant skills, then what are the people who lost to her in the Qing Jiao competition? What? Girl, you actually took first place in the Qing Jiao competition. Yi Zhiding suddenly spoke with a shocked expression. After he came out of seclusion, he had been busy dealing with Joyo Tower and didn't have time to find out about other things. Sun Zhongyan chuckled. Uncle Master, I almost forgot to tell you about this. Lu Yu indeed took first place twice. Yi Zhiding widened his eyes and only reacted after a while. Then, what about the celestial physician? Chu Luyue said honestly, Master, I didn't tell you anything. I didn't sign up for the Xian Master competition. Ha! Yi Zhiding was instantly disappointed. Although he knew that Chu Luyue might not be interested in the Celestial Physician competition at the Qing Jiao competition given her standards, she was still his old man's disciple. She took first place twice, but it had nothing to do with the Celestial Physician. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't disappointed. Sun Zhongyan held back his laughter and said, Uncle Master, Uncle Master. Although Lu Yu didn't sign up for the competition, the pill that won first place was refined by Lu Yu. Yi Zhiding was confused. Sun Zhongyan briefly explained the situation. So, from a certain perspective, Lu Yu can be considered to have taken first place in all 3 competitions. Sun Zhongyan sighed and looked at the Empress meaningfully. Also, Vice Admiral Mu of the Tianling dynasty has already chosen Lu Yu and thinks highly of her. The Empress's body swayed. She didn't like the person that Mu Qinghe liked. Wasn't she just making things difficult for herself? I'm not. The Empress was extremely nervous. She wanted to explain, but she realized that it would only be disadvantageous to her if she continued to harp on this issue. She suddenly thought of something and asked, Oh, that's right. There seems to be a restriction on every level of Joyo Tower. Prince Li's body is weak, so how did he reach the 6th level? You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.